Have you ever visited a website that amazed you to a level that you were thinking that how was this website even created? Well, if that is the case, then let me tell you, it was created from the basic step, which is HTML and CSS. Now, we at linuxhint have created a bootcamp course to learn HTML and CSS, which is the first stepping stone of becoming a web developer. So what you're going to learn in this course is that you're going to learn how to create this UI, which you can see on the screen, in HTML and CSS, along with all of the fundamental concepts that you need to learn about HTML and CSS. So the question is, what are you waiting for? Simply click on that Enroll Now button and let's get started with the course. Welcome to this course. So let's begin with the section number 1. In this section, we're going to talk about how the web works and the basic setup that you need to do to get started with the development of HTML and CSS. So let's move on to our first video. In this video, we will learn how to create an HTML file and how to run that file onto the browser with the help of Notepad. After we are done with that, we're going to learn how to set up a complete environment for web development using HTML and CSS. Now this is the setup that we would be using throughout this course, so make sure to follow along with that setup. So starting off with creating a new HTML file, simply head inside a folder and then right click to create a new file, and this is going to be a txt file. Name your file something like demo.txt, open that up in the Notepad and type anything that you want to display onto the browser. So for now, I'm not going to include any of the tags, we're just simply going to say like hello world. Save that file, exit from it, then rename it, and what you're going to do is that you're going to simply take the extension and change it to HTML and then hit enter. Now it is going to ask for this confirmation, so click on yes and the icon is going to change to the browser. So to open that up, simply double click on it and it would be executed in the browser. As you can see that it says hello world. So that is how you can create an HTML file with the help of Notepad and run it on the browser. Now this approach is not that much feasible when it comes to large scale web applications because Notepad is not that much reliable and it does not provide the user with additional features that we get from VS Studio Code. So coming on to step number 2, which is to set up our environment. So the very first thing that you're going to need is VS Studio Code. So simply head over to this website, which is code.visualstudio.com, and from here you need to download VS Studio Code depending upon the operating system that you're running on your PC. Now once that is done and you have installed VS Studio Code, simply open that up, and once you open up the VS Studio Code, you will be brought to this page. Now the very first thing that we're going to do inside this VS Studio Code is to install the recommended extension. Now the very first extension that we are going to need throughout this course is going to be Live Server. So simply search for Live Server, and this is the extension that you're going to install. After that, we're also going to be needing an extension to format our code, so that is going to be Prettier. So make sure to download and install this extension as well. After that, we have extensions that help us in different sections of HTML code, but they're not recommended, so it's totally optional for you to install them if you deem it necessary. So the very first one is HTML CSS support, and after that we have auto close. So this is the extension that you want to install. After that we have auto rename, this one right over here. And lastly, if you want your VS Studio Code to look a little better, then what you can do is you can install material icons, this one right over here. Anyways, once you have installed all of the extension, the next step is to create a folder in which we are going to create our HTML and CSS files. So for that, simply come over to the Explorer and click on this open folder button. Head over to desktop. I have already created this folder named as HTML, and then click on select folder. After that, we have this file named as demo.html, which we have created with the help of Notepad. Now simply come over here, erase all of the contents and simply type in doc and then hit tab. Now this is going to create this boilerplate which we would explain in the next videos. Anyways, for now you're done with the basic setup. Now all we need to do is we need to execute or run this HTML page onto the browser. Now to do this, let's write something down in the body. So let's type in hello world again. And this time around, to run this, we are going to be using the Live Server extension. Now to run it, simply click over this text that says go live. Now this is going to host this HTML page onto the local host. So if you have any idea of networking, you can see that this is the IP address of the local host. Anyways, that is how that you can create your whole environment for HTML and CSS. Again, we are going to be using the following extension which have been displayed in this video throughout this course. So don't get confused when you see something new. And see you in the next video. Have you ever wondered how can you access millions of websites by just entering their address in the web browser without having their code? Well, the answer is this magic happens because of the working of the World Wide Web. So before starting our journey of web development with the help of HTML and CSS, let us first understand how the web actually works. So whenever you put a URL inside a web browser, it is resolved. Well, this resolving means that the name that you put, which is the name of the website, actually points to a specific IP address of the server that is hosting that particular website. This process is known as resolving the IP address or resolving the DNS. After your request has been resolved, the request is then sent to that specific web server that is pointed out by the IP address. Then, the web server responds to the web browser with the result of your request. Then the browser renders the result for you onto the viewport of the browser. Well, that was the basic introduction of how the web works and how you can easily navigate to any website of your choice. Welcome to section HTML. In this section, we are going to talk about all of the elements that you can utilize to create your web page on the browser. So let's get started with this section. So in this video, we're going to talk about the basic introduction of HTML. Well, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. We're not going to spend a lot of time trying to teach you what HTML is and what is the difference about the different versions of HTML. Well, the first version of HTML was released in the year 1991 and the last or the latest version was released in 2014. On the screen, you can see all the versions of HTML along with the year of release. Now, as you can see that the last version was released in 2014, that means by the time of this recording, it has been 8 years. Now, you might think that HTML5 has been outdated, but that is not the case. And just to put into perspective, the difference between HTML1, which was released in 1991, and HTML5 is so huge that in the first version of HTML, you could not even render a single image or a single graphical representation onto the web page. But in today's era, you can make animations, you can make flawless GIFs and stuff like that easily appear on the web page and increase the interactivity of your website. Well, if we were to solely talk about the purpose of HTML, well, it helps in the creation of the entire content that the user can see on the web page. It functions just like a skeleton functions in the human body. HTML is assisted by CSS, which is used to beautify the contents of HTML. So we can simply say that HTML is the body, while CSS is the appearance or the clothes that you wear to increase the beauty of your physique. HTML contains plenty of elements which we will discover throughout this course, and throughout this course we will be working with the latest version, which is the HTML5. Well, that is enough for the introduction of HTML, as again we don't want to waste time on theoretical videos, we just want to jump right inside the VS Studio Code and start our web development journey. In this video, we're going to talk about the HTML page structure. So start off by creating an empty HTML page like I have on my screen. Then simply type in Shift+1, which is going to give us this exclamation mark, and then hit enter. Now this is going to generate this boilerplate on my screen. Now we're going to go through all of the elements within this boilerplate and tell you what are the purposes of all of these elements. So starting off from the top, we have the first element, and inside that element we have the doc type tag. Now if you're wondering what's the difference between a tag and then an element, then the keyword that defines what is the purpose or what's the use of this particular section or element, that is known to be a tag. And when the tag along with its content is enclosed within the less than and greater than symbol, then that whole section is known to be an element, which is going to be displayed onto the HTML page or give some kind of information about that HTML page to the browser. So starting off with the doc type element, it basically specifies what is the type of the document that is going to be displayed onto the page. So as you can see, we have the tag name doc type and the content or its value, which is set equal to HTML. So basically this is going to tell the browser that this is going to be an HTML page that you're going to display. So after the doc type tag or the doc type element, we have the HTML element. Now within this HTML element, we have the HTML tag followed up by one of the attributes. Now attribute is anything which defines the properties of a specific tag. For example, we have the attribute as language, and then the value of that attribute is placed or enclosed within these quotation marks. Now, there is one thing that you must know, that everything about a web page is given or placed inside the HTML tag, which means everything that is displayed onto the web page would be placed inside the body tag, and the head tag, which we can see right over here, would contain the information about that particular web page. This could include like the title tag, which we are going to cover in the next videos, the meta tags, which again we are going to cover in the next video. Anyways, that was all about the HTML web page structure. In this video, we're going to talk about the title tag. So a title is something that is displayed on the top of a web browser. So let me just quickly head over to a website, like we have the website linuxhint.com. So right over here is the title of the website. Now you might argue that the title is written right over here in this logo. Well, that is not correct, because that is an element of the HTML body tag. It is not the title. The title is always displayed right over here in the new tab section. So this was the title tag. So if we head back over to VS Studio Code and then we change the title tag of the boilerplate to something like web development journey, and then we launch our HTML document using the live server, then you can see that on the browser we have an empty page, but the title has been placed right over here as web development journey. So that was the title tag, which is placed inside the head tag. Now there are some tips that you might want to consider when you're trying to give your web page a title, and these tips are being displayed to you on your screen. So the very first tip is that the characters should not exceed more than 66. And the second one is that it is a good practice to give different titles to different web pages of your web application. And then it is quite useful to use a hyphen or a vertical dash to separate title words. So that was all about the title tag. In the previous video, we talked about the title tag, which was placed inside the head element. But that is not the only tag that is placed inside the head element. We even have the meta tag. Now meta tag is actually metadata that tells something about the web page to the web browser. So now as you can see in the first meta tag, we have an attribute known as the character set or char set. So this basically tells the browser the type of character set that we are going to be using. So UTF-8 is the standard character set. After the character set, we have another attribute which is HTTP-equiv. Now if you want to learn about a particular attribute like this HTTP-equiv, then simply hover your mouse over it and VS Studio Code would give you a description of that particular attribute. Like for HTTP-equiv, it tells us that it defines a pragma directory. The attribute is named as HTTP-equiv because all the allowed values are names of particular HTTP headers. And then we have a set of attributes that are mostly used together, which is the name attribute and the content attribute. So the name attribute is actually the definition or the description about the website, and content is a further more detail about that website or the content that is going to be displayed onto your website. So this was the meta tag. Again, meta tag is used to give metadata, and metadata is nothing but the data about the data. So basically, the meta tag tells some kind of information to the browser about the website that is going to be displayed on your web page. Now this meta tag is really crucial when you're trying to develop a website with a lot of traffic, because this meta tag is quite often used in SEO, which is search engine optimization, and keyword selection. So make sure to get a good grip of this meta tag. In this video, we're going to talk about the link tag. A link tag is used to attach external resources with your web page. These external resources are mostly CSS style sheets or any other style sheets, and these can even be fav icons. Now to create a link tag, simply head inside the head element and then simply type in link and then hit tab. Now this is going to generate a basic template for the link tag. Now as you can see in the template that we have two different attributes. One is the rel, which stands for relation, and the second one is href, which actually contains the path of the externally linked resource. Now in the rel attribute, you need to specify the type of the external resource. So this can be icon, this can be search, this can be alternate author, license, and style sheet whatsoever. And the href, again, you need to specify the path. So as you can see in my Explorer, I have this stylesheet.css, which is a CSS file, and I want to link this file with my web page. So what I can do is that I can simply pass in the path right over here like this, stylesheet.css, and then hit enter. And again, if you look at my rel attribute, it is set to style sheet. Now this CSS style sheet has been linked with my HTML web page. But what if you want to attach something else? What if you want to attach a fav icon? Well, to do that, simply create a new link tag, create an rel attribute, and set it equal to icon. Give a space and then type in the href attribute, and within this you're going to pass in the path for the icon. Now when creating an icon or when attaching an icon, you must keep in mind these few points. Now the points are that the extension of the image that you're using as an icon must always be .ico, which stands for icon. The size of the image should always be 32 by 32 pixels, and the image should be of high contrast for better visibility. Now, if you want to create new fav icons, then you can head over to zarla.com, which is this website which helps you create free logos, and then you can convert that logo into a fav icon. Or you can simply head over to favicon.cc, which is a tool that is used by many people. Anyways, I have used zarla.com to create this fav icon, which I'll be attaching with my HTML document. So I'm going to pass in the path as /icon.ico. So save that, close the previous session, and then create a new session by pressing the go live button. Now as you can see right next to the title, I have this fav icon set to my HTML document. Anyways, that was all about the link tag. Again, it can be used to link style sheets and fav icons to your web page. In this video, we're going to talk about the script tag that can be included between the head element. So to create a script tag, you simply type in the tag as script and then hit tab. Now you might wonder what this script tag is used for. Well, this script tag is used to attach a JavaScript to our HTML page. Now there are two ways to attach the JavaScript with our HTML page. We have the external JavaScript file, which we also do with the attribute of the script tag, or we can just simply type the JavaScript code within the HTML document with the help of the script tag alone. So I have my script tags over here, and now I'm going to write some JavaScript code to simply prompt the user about a button click. Now to make this function work, we need a button. So I'm going to head over to my body tag and then create a button. Now you do not have to worry about knowing how to create a button because we would cover this in the later videos. For now, just follow along with what I am doing. Now if you were to simply run this HTML document onto the browser, we would get this display. Now if I click on this button that says click me, we would get this alert that you have pressed the button. Now this is a functionality that I have added with this HTML document with the help of this script tag. Now suppose that you do not want to type the script file or the script code within this HTML document. You want to separate it in a separate JavaScript file. Well, you can easily do that. So create a JavaScript file like I've done over here with the name script.javascript. And in this file, I'm going to simply paste in my JavaScript code. Now, when you're working with an external JavaScript file, you do not have to type in the script tags. You just simply have to type in the JavaScript code. So I have written my JavaScript code right over here. And now what I have to do is that I need to link this script.javascript file with my HTML document. Now to do this, I'm going to add in an attribute of this script tag, which is the src or the source attribute. Now basically this attribute tells us that, okay, you want to read a script, then go over to this path and read the script from there. So since I'm working in the same directory, then simply type in / and then script.js. So what this is going to do is that it is going to simply say that head inside this script.javascript file and read the script code from there. Now I'll head over to my script.javascript file and change this alert message. And then I can just simply come back to my browser, click the button once more, and this time around I get the message that this message comes from the external JavaScript file. Anyways, this is how you can use the script tags to attach some kind of functionality with your HTML document. Now this script tag is not confined to the head element. This script tag can be placed in between the body tag as well, but it all depends upon when you want the script to be loaded. So if you place it inside the head element, the script is loaded before the body of the web page is loaded. And if you place it in between the body tag or at the end of the body tag, then it would be loaded after the body has been loaded. Anyways, that was all about the script tag in HTML. In this video, we're going to talk about the body element of the HTML document. So to explain the body element better, I'm going to open up my browser side by side with my VS Studio Code. So as you can see from the last video, we had created this button in the body tag and it was displayed onto the viewport of the browser. So basically you can get the idea that anything that we place inside the body tag would be displayed onto the viewport of the browser. So if I were to simply write hello world, even this would be displayed in the viewport of the browser. But this is not a good approach because we want to arrange the elements that we put onto the viewport of the browser. And for that we have various elements. And with the help of those elements, we can create beautiful web pages. So now in this video, we're going to talk about the different elements that we can use in the body tag as well. So let's start off with a paragraph element. So to create a paragraph element, you simply have to use the p tag. And in between this p tag, you can basically paste or type any text that you want to display onto the browser, just like this hello world. Now this p tag is used to create a paragraph. And if you were to have multiple p tags, then they would be displayed as different individual paragraphs onto the web browser. So if I were to simply take this p tag and duplicate it and write some other text inside it. Now if I save my code, you can see that onto the browser that this line welcome to linuxhint has been printed onto a different paragraph. Now we will talk about why this paragraph is in a different row than the paragraph above and why is it not taking the same row. Now to better explain what I mean by this by taking the same row, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to remove these paragraph tags and simply type hello world in one line onto my VS Studio Code, and then in the next line I'm going to try and write welcome to linuxhint. Now as you can see on the display that both of these sentences have been placed right next to each other. Well, this is because the elements of a web page have something known as the display property. Now we will talk about the display property later on the video, but for now just understand this that the p tag actually takes up a new line or a new row when we duplicate it. So heading back to our previous code, we have the two different P tags taking up two different rows onto the display page. Now after the P tag, we have something known as the headings. Now if you were to imagine a newspaper, then you would know what a heading is on the newspaper. So similarly, we can create headings on a web page. For that we have individual tags for individual sizes of headings. So the biggest heading has the tag H1. So if I write anything inside H1, it would be considered as the biggest heading of the web page. I can simply type hello in there. So this is going to give me this bold and big text onto the web page. After that, we have a total number of 6 headings available in the HTML, starting from H1 going up to H6. So if I were to simply create all of those headings, and you can see on the display page that with the help of different headings, I have the text in different formatting. So the H1 is the biggest, H2 is slightly smaller, H3 is smaller than H2, and then it goes up to H6. So that is how you can use headings. Now in most cases, the heading comes before the paragraph, so I'm going to place this heading H1 tag before my P tags. After this, we have something known as a line break. So as you can see on the display page that each textual sentence is written on a different row. So we have hello on a different row, hello world on a different row, welcome to linuxhint on a different row. But what if I want to type a paragraph, a single paragraph, and that paragraph should have multiple subparas? For example, what if I want to write welcome to linuxhint in 2 different rows? For that what I can do is that I can simply add in a break row tag which is represented by BR. With this you can clearly see that welcome to linuxhint have been separated into 2 different rows. Now this BR tag can also be used to separate each individual element from each other. So if I were to simply create 2 P tags and I wanted them to have a much more wider space than they already get, then I can simply put some BR tags in between them. For example, if I want hello world and welcome to Linux separated by even more rows, then I can simply put in BR tags. The more BR tags I put, the more rows I break. And now all of these rows on which I have put the BR tag are unusable for any element. Now sometimes we want to separate sections with the help of BR tag. Well, the BR tag is good for that, but we have another tag that puts a horizontal rule onto the web page that actually visually separates the 2 elements or multiple elements. Now that tag is known as the HR tag, which stands for horizontal row. Now instead of putting all of these BR tags or a single BR tag, I can just simply go along with an HR tag which stands for horizontal row, and then I would get this horizontal divider on my web page. Anyways, these were only a few of the elements that can be placed inside the body element. Now to quickly go over what we have learned in this video, then the body element is the one which contains all of the elements to be displayed onto the web page. Now the body element can contain multiple headings, and to create headings we have the tags H1 up to H6. After that, if we want to write a paragraph onto the web page, then we have the paragraph tag which is represented by the tag P. After that we have the line break or the break row tag represented by BR, which is used to put a space between 2 elements. After that, we have a visual representation of that break row which is known as the horizontal row, which actually puts up this horizontal row onto the web page. In the next videos, we are going to learn more about the elements that can be placed in the body tag. In this video, we are going to talk about the HTML comments and text formatting. So we are going to start off with what HTML comments are. Now basically the HTML comment is the text that is ignored by the code editor and it is not displayed onto the web browser. Now it is the text that has been placed for the web developer to understand either a certain part of code or to explain that part of code to someone who is going to read the code in the future. Now to create a comment, what you do is that you use the less than symbol followed up by an exclamation mark and then double hyphens. After that you get this auto-completed HTML comment. Now in here we can type anything. Now as you can see that on line number 13 I have added this HTML comment, and if I were to simply save my program or reload the web page, then I would not get this comment displayed onto the web page. Again, this HTML comment is not executed onto the web page, rather it is only there to provide some kind of information about the code. Now let's talk about the text formatting. So basically with the help of text formatting, you can format the textual data that you put in a paragraph tag or onto the web page. For this, what we're going to do is we're going to remove all of these headings and only going to leave one paragraph tag. And within this tag, simply type in lorem and then hit enter, and then you get this lorem ipsum text on the VS Studio Code, and you can get that same text onto the web page as well. And now what we're going to do is that we're going to apply different type of text formatting on this lorem ipsum paragraph. So starting off with the bold tag. The bold tag is used to bold a certain text. So simply type the tag as B and after the word that you want to bold, simply type the closing tag as /b. Now if I save my program, you can clearly see that the word ipsum has been bolded out. After that, we have another tag which is the strong tag. So I'm going to remove this B and type strong over here. Same goes for the ending tag. Now as you can see in the output, it is pretty much similar to the bold text or the bold tag, but it is used to highlight the important text. After the strong, we have the italic. So simply change the tag from strong to I and as well as the closing tag. Now what this is going to do is that it is going to turn that word italic right over here. After that, we have various tags that we can use for text formatting. Now all of these tags are being displayed onto you on the screen and even with the purpose for which they are used. Anyways, that was all about comments and text formatting in the HTML. In this video, we are going to talk about how to use the style attribute and how to add colors to an HTML element. Now, before jumping inside adding colors, we know that it is a part of a CSS and we will learn more details about adding color or styling your element in the CSS section, but in this section we are just going to go over the tiny details very briefly over the coloring or the styling section. So let's create an h1 tag. Let's just call it linuxhint. After that, let's create an h2 tag. Now for every element, we have this style attribute. And to place this attribute, what you need to do is that you need to place the keyword style right after the tag name, just like this. After that, you follow it up with an is equal symbol and then quotation marks. And in between the quotation marks, you can place in the styling that you want to apply on your HTML element. So starting off with color. To set a particular color, what you can do is you can use the keyword color followed up by a colon and then the name of the color that you want to give to this particular element. Now by default, HTML provides a total of 144 names or 144 predefined colors. Now they can be as red. So if I were to simply save my program and open up my browser, you can see that the h1 tag linuxhint has been turned to color red. Apart from setting the color, we can even choose the background color. So for this h2 tag, I'm just going to type in the style attribute and type in background color and set it equal to dark sea green. So now if I head back over to my browser, you can see that this h2 tag now has a background color of dark sea green. Anyways, that is how you can apply colors. But this is not the only way to specify the color that you want to apply. Now this color keyword can take different formats of color. We can have RGB values, hex values, HSL values, RGBA and HSLA values. So let's go over them one by one. Starting off with the RGB values. So what we're going to do is that we're going to simply remove this red, which is a predefined in HTML, and then type in the keyword RGB. After that, we need to follow it up with round brackets, and within these round brackets, we need to pass in the values for red, green and blue. So the values have the range from 0 to 255. So if I want to create the color plum, I would have to type in the red value as 221 followed up by 160 for the green and 221 for the blue. So now if I save this and head back over to my browser, we can see that the linuxhint h1 tag has been changed to a plum color. So that is how you can use the RGB values. After that, we have the hex values. Well, I'm going to apply the hex value on this background color. Now, hexadecimal values have a format of RR, GG and BB. So basically, each individual character has a range from 0 to F. So the red color or the red part, RR, actually has a range of 256 because 16 multiplied by 16 is 256. Anyways, to create a plum color in this hex values, what we need to do is that we need to use the key code DDA0DD, which represents 221, 160 and 221. So now if I head back over to my browser, we can clearly see that the background of this h2 tag has been changed to the plum color. So that is how you can use the hexadecimal values for the color. Now you might be wondering, why should you even use the RGB values or the hex values, as just typing out the name of that color is much easier. Well, the reason is that each color method has its own benefits. For example, the RGBA allows you to add opacity with the increment of one extra argument, which is the alpha channel. So it becomes the RGBA coloring. So if I were to give an opacity of 0.5, then I can simply type a comma and then add 0.5 right over here. So if I head back over to my browser, you can see that now it is half transparent, or we can simply say that the opacity is up to 50%. Now the value of this alpha channel has a range of 0 to 1. 1 meaning 100% and 0 meaning 0%. Anyways, moving on to the next coloring method, which is the HSL values. Now HSL stands from hue, saturation and lightness. So to apply an HSL value, what you need to do is that you need to change this key value or the keyword from RGB to HSL followed up by round brackets, and within the round brackets you're going to pass in the values for hue, saturation and lightness. Now if you were to talk about the hue is a degree on the color wheel starting from 0 up to 360. Now 0 is for red, whereas 120 is for green and 240 is for blue. So I can simply type the hue value as 275. Now the next value is saturation. Now saturation and lightness both are percentage values. 0% means a shade of grey, 100% means a complete color or the full color. So for this value I'm just going to type the saturation as 80%. After that we have the lightness. Again, lightness is also in percentages. 0 is for black and 100% is for white. Now I'm going to set the lightness to 85%. So now if I save my program and head on over to my browser, we can clearly see that we have this plum color for the H1 tag. I'm just going to create another H3 tag. I'm just going to call this one as HSLA. After that I'm going to add in a style attribute, set it equal to color colon followed up by HSL A values. Now again, just like for the RGB values, we had an extra channel which was known as the alpha channel. We have that one for the HSL values as well. So this time around I'm going to pass the values as 240 followed up by 100% saturation and 50% lightness, and then opacity being 0.3. So now if I head on over to my browser, you can see that we have this kind of bluish shade which is transparent by 30%. So this is the concept of adding in the style attribute and coloring our element on the HTML document. Again, styling is a process of CSS, so that would be better covered in that section. In this video, we are going to talk about the button tag that defines a clickable button. Now we have created a button in the script tag video. Now to create a button, you just have to use the button element. Now anything that you want to display on the button, you have to type it in between these two button tags. So if I want this button to say click me, then I would write that in between this button tag like this, and this button would take up that much space to show that text. Now there are three different types of button that you can attach using the type attribute. Now these types are button, submit and reset. While the submit and the reset type of the button are used with forms, so we are only going to be covering the button type in this video. We will talk about the reset button type and the submit button type in the form video. Anyways, to attach an attribute, simply come over to the tag and type the attribute as type and then set it equal to button. This is going to tell the browser that this button is not attached to any form and it does not have to send data back to a server or to reset the elements of the form. It is only a button that can have functionality with the help of JavaScript. Now for now, we are not going to show you how to attach the functionality of this button, because this is not a course about JavaScript, it is only about HTML and CSS. In the script video, we have shown you how you can attach the functionality upon a button with the help of JavaScript. Now let's talk about the different types of attributes that a button can hold other than the type attribute. So the first one is the name attribute. So the name specifies the name of the button, not what it is displaying onto the web page, rather the name of the button element that we are using on the web page. Now this name attribute is very essential, especially when you're working with a script just like JavaScript. After the name attribute, we have the value attribute. Now this value attribute will hold a value in the backend with respect to the name of this button. Now we can put the value as whatever we want. So we can simply type it as HTML button. After that, we have another attribute, that is the disabled attribute. Now this is going to disable the button on the HTML web page, but it is not going to hide it from the HTML web page. So if I simply add in the attribute as disabled, you can clearly see that the button is now grayed out. After that, this button element is known to be an inline element. Now what do we mean by inline element? And in the previous video we talked about something known to be the display property as block. So basically the inline elements take the width as needed on the screen, and the next element is stacked right after it on the web page. So if I were to simply write some text in front of this button element like hello, it would be placed right next to the button. On the other hand, if it was a block element just like this h2 tag, and if I were to write some text in front of this h2 tag like hello world, it would be placed on a different row because the block element takes up the entire width of the row on the web page. So that is the major difference between the inline elements and the block elements. We can even format the text to be displayed onto the button. For this I'm just going to simply remove the disabled attribute, and after that, right before the text we can add in some tags like the bold tag, and it is going to bold the text of the button. Similarly, we can add in other tags like the strong tag, the italic tag, and even an image to be displayed onto the button. Other than this, you can apply different styling with the help of CSS, but we are going to cover that in the CSS section. So that was all about this video. In this lesson, we are going to talk about the image element for the HTML document. Now the image element, as the name suggests, it is used to display an image onto the web page. So let me just come over to the body tag and clear everything out. After that, to create an image element, I simply have to type in img and then hit tab. Now this is going to create this image element. Now as you can see that the template has created us two attributes. One is the source and the other one is known as the alternate. So the source is very simple. You just have to basically give the path to the image file that you want to display onto the web page. After that, alternate is just like it sounds like, it is the alternate of the image. So if the image is not being displayed onto the web page due to any error, then an alternate text would be displayed in place of that particular image. So let's simply add our image in this folder of HTML. So you can see in the Explorer that I have added this doc.png image. Now to display it onto the web page, I'm going to simply type in the relative path, which is the / and then find the doc.png. And if this image is not being displayed onto the web page, then I want to say some alternate text like, after placing it both in the attributes, I can simply head over to my browser. And as you can see on the browser, I am able to display this picture of a dog onto my web page. Now let's see what is the use of the alternate attribute. For that, let's simply head over to the browser or the Explorer and let's delete this doc.png. After that, let's save our code so that the web browser is refreshed, and we can see over here that it shows an alternate text that there was an image over here. After that, we also have the height and the width attributes in HTML to set the size of the image, as the image is rendered in actual size. But it is a better practice to give it a size and styling in the CSS. So we're going to cover height and width in the CSS section. And if we talk about the different types of formats that we can display, then we can display JPEG, GIF, PNG, APNG, SVG, BMP, BMP icon, PNG icon, and so much more onto the HTML document. Also, this image element is an inline element. So if I were to simply bring back my doc.png, and after that, if I simply wrote something like this is a dog and head back over to my browser, you can clearly see that this text is written right next to the image. So meaning that this image element is an inline element. Anyways, that was all about the image element in the HTML document. After the image element, let's talk about how can we link to other pages using our web page. Basically, we're going to learn how to create hyperlinks that link or navigate to another page. To create hyperlinks, we have something known as the anchor tag or the A element. So to create an anchor tag, simply write A and then hit tab. This is going to create this template for the anchor tag. So you can see that this anchor tag has an href attribute, and within this quotation marks, you need to pass in the path for the web page that you want to navigate to. And in between these two tags, what you can do is you can place the text that you want the user to see, which the user can then click. So let's just create an anchor tag. For this, we can even refer or navigate to the local web pages. For example, if I were to simply create a new HTML document and just call it index.html, and in here I'm going to create a boilerplate, and in the body tag, let's just use something new. So let's just use the center tag. This center tag or the center element is basically going to align all of the elements in the center of the web page. After that, we will just use the h1 heading tag and then simply say this is the second page. Now we want to navigate, we want to provide a link to the user that is going to navigate to the index.html. First of all, in the href, we are going to simply say index.html. After that, in between both of these tags, we are going to simply say click here. So now if I head over to my browser, on the browser you can see this text click here, but this text is clickable. So if I simply click on this text, you can see that the path has changed to index.html and the contents of the second page, which is the index.html, is being displayed onto the web browser. So that is how you can create anchor tags to link to other websites. Other than this, you can see that this index.html has been opened inside the same tab in which we were opening up the demo.html. But what if we want to actually open this tab up in a new tab? So we can easily do that. Let's head back to the demo.html. After that, we're going to come over to the A tag, and in here we have an attribute known as the target attribute. Now this target attribute can take one out of 4 values. So we have the blank, we have parent, we have self, we have top. We are only concerned with the blank and the parent one. So if we select blank, this means that it is going to open up the new page, which is index.html, in a new tab. And if we choose parent, then it is going to only redirect to the index.html without opening up a new tab. So let's set it equal to blank, save our program, and then head over to the browser. Now if I click here, this is going to open up a new tab with index.html loaded inside it. What if we want to create a newsfeed and the user can scroll down the newsfeed, and at the bottom we present a hyperlink that takes the user to the same page but to the very top? Well, we can easily do that if we simply head over to the href attribute and change it to a hash symbol. That is going to basically refresh the same page, but we can add in another attribute or another value to this attribute, which is the hash and then followed up by top. This is going to refresh the page or take the user to the top of the current page. So from this we can conclude that this hash indicates the same page. Anyways, that was all about creating anchor tags in HTML document. In this video, we are going to learn about the HTML list that you can create onto the HTML document. Now there are 3 different types of lists that you can create in the HTML document. We have the ordered list, unordered list, and descriptive list. So we're going to start off with unordered list, and then we are going to make our way towards the descriptive list. So in the body element, I'm going to create an h1 tag, and I'm going to simply type in the name of the list that we are going to create. So starting off with unordered list. And just to make this permanent, I'm going to add in the style attribute and give it a color of red. Now this is also good so that you can practice coloring with the help of the style attribute. After that, you must know that to create a list, we have 2 different elements that should be used in conjunction. So we have the container, which specify what type of list that we are going to use, and then we have the list items. These are the items to be placed inside that particular list. So to create an unordered list, we have the UL element. Now between these tags of the UL element, we are going to pass in our list elements or the list items. Now to create or specify a list item, you use the element li, which stands for list item. And in between these 2 tags, you specify or give the description of the item, which can be item 1. After that, I want my list to show at least 5 items. Therefore, I'm going to duplicate this line 4 more times. After that, I'm going to simply change the item description from item 1 to item 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then if I head on over to my web browser, you can see that we have this output onto the web browser. So we have our list, which is unordered, and the list items are being represented by this small circle. Now, for every list, we have a type attribute, and this basically defines the representation for every item. Like in this output, these list items are being represented by a small dot. But what if in the unordered list, I want to represent this with the help of a small square? So if I simply add in the attribute type and change the value to square and then head on over to my browser, you can see that the circle has been changed to square. So that was the unordered list. Now let's talk about the ordered list. So let me just quickly change my heading tag over here to ordered list. After that, I'm going to change my UL element to OL element, standing for ordered list. After that, I do not need the type attribute to start with. So I'm going to remove the type attribute, and I'm just going to give you the vanilla output of the ordered list. So if I head on over to my browser, you can see that we have an ordering of the item, and this order represented by numbers. So what if I want to represent this ordering by something else? For that, we again have the type attribute. So let me just type in the type attribute in the ordered list, and you can see the VS Studio Code shows you the possible types that you can use. So we have the alphabet, capital A, small a, then capital I, small I, and the number. Well, the number, which is 1, is the default setting, which gives us this output. So I'm going to change it to capital A. So if I change the type to capital A, this basically means that to represent the items of the list with the help of capital alphabets. And if I change that to small a, this is going to represent these list items with the help of small alphabets. And now if I change this to capital I, this is going to represent these items with the help of the Roman counting or the capital Roman counting, like this. And if I change it to small I, then it's going to convert that representation into small Roman counting or Roman numbering, just like this. So this was the ordered list in the HTML document. Now let's talk about creating the third type of list, which is the descriptive list. Now to create a descriptive list, first of all, we need to change this OL type to DL type, which stands for descriptive list, and let me just remove the type attribute. After that, For every list item, you do not use the li element at all. Instead, you need to use the dt element, which stands for descriptive term or title. So in here I'm going to give my item name, so it can be item 1. After that, a dt tag or element should always be followed by a dd element. Now this basically means the detailed description. Similarly, if I were to simply copy both of these lines a few more times to create at least 4 items, and let me just change the description to the description of item 2, 3 and 4. Now if I simply head back over to my browser, you can see that we have the item title followed up by the description of the item. Again item title followed up by the description of the item number 2. And this is how you can basically create a descriptive list. Now you might be wondering, what if you want to use a combination of all these 3 different types of list? Well, that is called a nested list, and you can easily create a nested list. For example, I'm just going to quickly write a code. Now you can clearly see that we have the outermost list as an ordered list, followed up by list item which contains a nested unordered list. So let's just simply get the output onto the browser. So if I head back onto the browser, you can clearly see that we have this very nice kind of appendix or the index of a particular book or the syllabus of a course. So this is how you can merge or play with nested list to create something very useful. So that was all about list in the HTML document. Again, you can easily customize this list or the way it looks with the help of CSS, but we are going to cover that in the CSS section. This section is purely about the HTML elements and how you can display individual elements onto the web browser. In this video, we are going to talk about the form element in the HTML. Well, the form element is used to collect user information from the user and send it to the backend for further processing. Now to create a form element, simply head inside the body tag and type the tag as form and then simply press tab to create this form element. Now you can already see that we have this action attribute, but we'll talk about this action attribute later on in this video. Let's talk about the elements that you can place inside a form. So starting off, we need some kind of input from the user, and for that we have the input element. Now this input element can have a type attribute which specifies the type of the input that we want to take from the user. But for now I'm just going to create this very simple form and then display you the web page that comes on the browser. So now you can see in the browser that we only have this input field on the web page, but we want to place some information, some textual information to tell the user that we want a specific information from that user. So if we want to get the first name of the user, then we want to tell the user that this input field is specific for the first name. Now for that we have this label element, and this element takes in the for attribute. Well, I will explain you the for attribute in just a minute, but for now let's simply type in the thing that we want to get from the user. So if I want to get the first name, I would simply type that over here and then save my program. Now you can see that we have this text telling the user that this field is specific for the first name. Anyway, let's talk about this for attribute. So like I said previously, the forms are used to send data to the backend server so that they can be processed further. So whenever the data is sent to the backend, we want some attribute that can specify or identify the value. For that we use this ID attribute. So I'm going to give this input field the ID attribute of name, and then I'm going to bind this label tag with this specific ID. So I'm going to give the for attribute equal to name. So now my label attribute is binded with this input field. Anyways, in the form you can have label element, you can have the input element. Other than that, you can create a button that the user can press when he has done inserting the data. So for that we simply type in button and press tab to create this button element. Now in between these tags of button, you can specify what to say with this button. So I can just simply say click me. But this button element must have type attribute which specifies the type of this button. Now I have explained the types of button in the previous video. So we have a normal button, we have the menu button, and then we have a reset button which will just simply reset the form, and then we have the submit button. And the submit button would take the information from the form and send it to the backend. So we are just going to create a submit button. After that, we need to specify the location of the backend server. That we can do in the form element. So in the form element, we need to specify the method. So there are different methods that we can use with forms. So at first we have the dialog method, then we have the get method, and then we have the post method. So basically get is a request to get some kind of information back from the server. Post is used when we want to deliver something to the server so that it can be further processed, which we are going to do in our case as well. So I'm going to set the method of the form to post. So in this action attribute, we are going to specify the location of our backend server. So suppose that we have written our backend server code in a PHP file whose location is /action_server.php. So this way we are going to specify the server. After that, if I simply save my program, I have this page, and now if I click on this button, you can see that it is trying to access that page written in PHP. Although we got this error just because we have not created that backend server. But if I were to simply change this method from post to get, this time around this HTML web page is expecting something from the server. So now if I click on this button, it is getting me that it cannot find any response from this server. So that is how you can use the method attribute and the action attribute with the form element. Anyways, let's talk about the other element that you can place inside the form element. So the other element that you can place inside the form is actually select. This select element is used to create a drop down list. So I can give it a name like food and then give it an ID. So as you can see in the output, my list is currently totally blank. So now if I want to create elements or a list inside this drop down menu, then what I would do is inside this select element or inside the tags of the select element, I'm going to create an option element. And in this, I'm going to give it some value so that the backend server could recognize this option. So I'm just going to give it value 1 and then the text I want to show to the user. So now as you can see that I have created 4 options for my drop down list. So now if I click on this button, you can see that I have this tiny little drop down list. So I can select any option and it has a specific value that would be sent to the backend and then click on the button. Other than this drop down menu, you can create a text area. So you can see in this input field, this is a single line input field. But if you want to get some kind of special information from the user that requires multiple lines, then for that you can use text area. Now to create a text area, you first need a label tag. So create a label tag. And after the label tag, I'm going to create a text area. Give it a name. After that, you can specify the columns and the rows of the text area according to your requirements. But now you can see that the text area is actually messing up with our form. So for that, we're going to simply place in a BR tag. But right now, our form looks kind of messy. So let's actually create a good form that is for ordering food and that asks the customer for his name, his phone number, and then tells the user to select something from the menu. So I'm just going to remove every element from the form tag and then I'm going to create a nicely formatted form. So let's start this by including an h1 element and I'm going to call this order food. After that, I'm going to create a form, but I'm not going to include any of the method attributes or the action attribute just because I'm not going to send this data to the back end. I'm just going to simply show this form onto the browser. So in this form, I'm just going to create a label tag that is going to ask the customer for his name. Now to get this name, I'm going to use the input tag. It is going to be of the text type. Its ID is going to be name. After that, I'm going to place a BR tag. And then I'm going to copy this thing, these 2 elements, paste them after the BR tag so that I can ask the customer for his phone number. And I'm going to change the ID of my input tag to contact number. And I'm going to also paste this in the for attribute of my label. Similarly, the name goes over here as well. After that, I'm going to include another BR tag, and after this, I want to create a drop-down list for the user. So I'm going to start off with a label tag, and I'm going to go with option food, and then I'm going to tell the user to select a particular order. So after that, I want to create the drop-down menu for the user, so I'm going to use the select element. The ID is going to be option food. And inside this select element, I'm going to create multiple option elements. And at the very end of this form, I want to create the button so that the user can confirm his order. And I'm going to set the type of the button to submit. So now on the output you can clearly see that we have created this minimalistic form. So it asks the user for his name, his phone number, and the order that he wants to place. So we have different options like chocolate cake, smoothie, lava cake or cupcake. I can choose any one and then click on place order. Now after creating this form, you must know there are different types of input that you can take from the user. It must not always be text. Therefore, we're going to try out different types of input that you can take within the input element. So if I were to simply remove this form and type in input element, then you can see that we have this type attribute. Now this type attribute can take in multiple options. So you already know what this text attribute does. It allows the user to enter textual data. After that, let's check out a checkbox. A checkbox is very simple. It creates a checkbox for the user to select. So to create a checkbox, I can simply provide a label for this checkbox. And then you would have something like this on the browser. So it tells the user if he wants this specific item, and then the user can then simply click on the checkbox to select that particular item. So with the help of checkbox, you can provide the feature to the user to simply click on the checkbox to select a particular item. Now this is very easy for the user. Other than this, you can create radio buttons. Now radio buttons are used when you want the user to select one option from a group of options. So now to create a radio button, let me just create a label tag which will say select the platter size. Once that is done, I'm going to create a radio button by setting the type attribute of the input field to radio. Now, like I said that you want to give multiple options to the user, but you want to restrict the user to select only one of them. Now to do this, what you need to do is that you need to set the name attribute of all the options in a particular group exactly the same. So I'm going to call this one as platter. And then I want to show something right next to this radio button. For that, I'm also going to use the label tag. Now if I simply copy paste this 2 more times, so you have this on the output. You can see that I have 3 different radio buttons, and then I have the label telling the user about the option that he has. So the cool thing is I can only choose one of these options. So if I click on large and then click on small, my selection would change. So I can just click on anything that I want and then I can order. So if you were to merge both of the forms that we have created in this video, you will get something like this onto the browser. So now we have a complete form that the user can use to order a food and also select the size of the platter. So this was an HTML form. Anyways, this form right now does not look that pretty. So we are going to style it in the CSS section. Anyways, that was it for this video. In this video, we're going to talk about the div element and the span element. Now both of these elements are used to define divisions in an HTML document. The div element is a block element that I use as a container for the other HTML elements, which are then styled with CSS or manipulated with JavaScript. Now the div element automatically always places a line before and after itself. That means after the div element. So I have this form that we created in the previous video. What if I wanted to separate this contact information or the information about the user and then this platter size in different containers and then style it differently with the help of CSS? Now what I can do is that I can create a div element. So I can then simply come over here and then type div and hit a tab, and then I'm going to place this ending tag after the information of the user. So as you can see that after the information of the user, I have used this br tag, but I don't want to use this br tag, rather I want to use the div tag. Now the div element, as I've explained previously, it automatically places a line before and after itself. So I don't actually require the br tag anymore. After that, for this platter size menu, I'm also going to confine this in another div container. And then what I can do is I can place this button in a separate div container as well, so I can style it according to my needs. So now you can see that the div element has nothing to display onto the page, as it is only a simple container. So we have done the style attribute in the past, so I'm just going to give a separate background color to each individual div container. So I'm going to place the style attribute, set the background color to red, and then I'm going to simply copy this style attribute, place it in the other div container and give it yellow. And lastly, for the button, I'm going to give it a separate color like blue. I know this does not look pretty at all, but this is just to show you that these are separate containers created with the help of the div element. Now you can better style it in the CSS, which we would do later on in this course. And after the div element, we have the span element. Now the span element is an inline element. So suppose that we have this paragraph element and we have written the words red, green and blue. And what if I want to style them according to what they say? So now if I want to style the words inside the paragraph tab separately, I can use a span element. So I would create a span element, which is actually nothing but a container. But since it is an inline element, unlike the div, it is not going to break this line. And then I can add in the style attribute and set the color to what the word says, which is red, just like that. And then I can simply repeat the same process, just like that. So you can see that the paragraph has not been broken down into different blocks, rather it stays in the same row, and we have applied different styling with different words with the help of the span element. Now, and just to make the difference visible, I am going to change this span tag for the green color to div. So now if I save my program, you can clearly see that it has added a row above and after the element. So, and this was because that div is a block element. Anyways, that was all about the div containers, and the span containers is the HTML. Now make divs and spans your best friends, because when you're going for a front-end development, then divs and spans are the ones that you are going to use the most. In this video, we will talk about how to create tables in the HTML with the help of the table element. The HTML table element is used to arrange data in the form of rows and columns onto a web page. Now to create a table, we must know that the table element is used in conjunction with the table row element, table head element and the table data element. Now what do we mean by this? Well, we will learn step by step. Let's start off by creating a table. Now like I mentioned before, we need to use the table element. Now this table element has three different elements that you can store or place inside this table element, which is the TR standing for table row, TH standing for table head and TD standing for table data. So every table must contain a specific row. So we start off with a table row. Now inside these rows we need to create the columns. Now the columns can be created with the help of table data or table header. In most cases, the first row contains the headings for each individual column. So we are going to define the headings with the help of the TH element, which stands for table head. So we can give the heading as menu and then create another row, and this time around it is going something like price. And now if I save my program, you can see that we have two different words onto the web page. Now this does not look like a table, and that is because we do not have the border or the grid of the table, but we will get there soon. Anyways, after that we are going to move into the next row. So for the next row we again need to use the TR element, and in this row we are going to simply add in the data for menu and price. So we are going to use the element TD, which stands for table data, and we're going to say something like chocolate cake, and then for the price we're going to create another TD tag and say $10. So if I save my program, you can see that this table is taking as much space as it requires. Anyways, let's add in some more rows. So I'm just going to copy this row and paste it a few more times and then change the contents. So now you can see that I have a table for menu and price, and if you look closely, the price column is placed at a very specific point and the menu starts from a specific point as well, but this is still not clear as we do not have the grids and stuff like that. Anyways, the table data or this TD element is known as a table cell, and each table cell can contain all sorts of HTML elements. That means that we can have text, images, lists, links, other tables as well. So the possibilities are almost infinite. You can even add the caption element inside the table element. Anyways, the table element is not usually used quite often nowadays with the improvement in HTML or web development in general. Other than these, you can add in the column span and the row span attributes to the table elements. Now to explain this, we are going to create another table row, and in that we are going to create table data, which explains a cell. And what if I want a specific cell to span two rows and two columns, or two rows and one column? For that we are going to add in the attribute row span and set its value equal to 2. This means that this specific cell is going to take up to 2 rows in space. And then I can simply just type in 2 row cell as the data. Now this is not clear onto the table. Now to better explain this, we are going to create a new row. And this is how you can create a cell that uses a specific amount of rows or columns. Anyways, Now in the table element or the table tag, we are going to add in the attribute border and give it some kind of width. So we can give it a value of 3 pixels and then save. So now you can see that we get this border around our cells. But what if we want to give it a specific outline? For that we are going to use the style attribute from the CSS and we're going to set the value of outline to a specific color, specific width and the type of the outline that we want. So if I want a solid outline, then I would type in solid and then save my program and we will get this solid outline around our border. Anyways, if I want to change the border or the grid that you get around the cells into something different, so we are going to use this property which is border collapse and we are going to set its value equal to collapse. As you can see that currently we have a lot of borders around each individual cell, but we want only one row to combine 2 or more cells. For that, if I save my program now, so now you can see that the grid around each individual cell has been changed to a single line. Anyways, that is how you can create tables in the HTML web page. In this video, we are going to talk about the HTML IDs and classes attributes. So basically, we can give these attributes to any HTML element to select them, or for the purpose of styling them and manipulating them using JavaScript. The ID attribute specifies a unique ID for an HTML element. It is represented as a hash sign followed up by the name of the ID in the CSS. In this video, we are not going to go into detail about the IDs or the use of IDs with the CSS. However, we will see this in detail in the CSS section or in the CSS selector lesson. So you can see that we have this list which is of chapters and their information about particular chapters. So we have given IDs to individual chapters, like for this chapter 1, we have given this list an ID of C1. For this chapter 2, we are given the ID C2. Now what if we wanted to create anchor tags and upon clicking that anchor tag, it will bring us or scroll our web page to a specific chapter. For that, we're going to head to the bottom of the page. Now outside of this list, I'm going to create an anchor tag. And for the href, we are going to use the hash sign followed up by the ID of that specific chapter. So suppose that this anchor tag says chapter 1. So I want to give the ID of chapter 1 over here, that would be C1. Similarly, I can duplicate this and then I can simply change these IDs according to the chapters I want to jump to. Once that is done, I can come to my web page, go to the very bottom of this page and then click on a specific chapter to scroll this web page on that chapter. So suppose that I wanted to go to a chapter 2, then I would simply click on this button. So it is going to scroll the web page in a way that chapter 2 is at the very top of my web page or the viewport of my web page. Anyhow, that is the very basic use of IDs to perform a very basic function on the web page. Now let's talk about classes. Apart from this, these IDs can be used to style a specific element in the CSS. So if I were to simply create a style attribute or style element, in here we're going to pass in our CSS code. So you can see that I have used the ID selector, which was the hash symbol and C1, just like we did in the anchor tag, and then I've written some code for the CSS. Don't worry right now, but we will talk about this CSS code later on in this course. Anyways, so if I simply scroll my web page to the very top where chapter 1 actually exists, then you can clearly see that we have applied some kind of styling to this chapter 1 element. Anyways, that is how you can use the ID tag to perform a specific action or to style a specific element. Let's now talk about the HTML class attribute. Basically, we can give the same class name to different elements for selecting them all together. Now, it is represented by a dot followed up by the name of the class that you want to give if you are doing CSS styling. So if I were to simply remove the ID elements or ID attributes from this list and paste in class attributes for similar topics, so you can see that, let's say the chapter 1 and the chapter 2 was the introduction to our course. So we have grouped them under the category or under the class intro. And then we had 3 chapters under the category or under the class body, so we have grouped them using the class attribute. Now what if I simply want to style the chapters that are included inside the intro section? So I can easily do that. So if I simply come over to my style element and instead of the hash sign, I'm going to use a dot sign followed up by the name of the class. So the class name was intro. So as you can see that as soon as I save my program, both of the chapters under the same class name have been restyled with the help of the CSS. Anyways, that was the very basic use of IDs and classes, but we will learn more in detail knowledge about IDs and their use and classes and their use later on in this course. So in this video, we are going to talk about the HTML semantic elements. So basically, the HTML semantics are also containers for other HTML elements just like div and span, but they clearly describe the purpose to the developers and to the web browser as well. So we have multiple HTML semantics. So we have header that defines that all the elements inside it would create a header. Navigation to create a navigation bar, footer to create a footer of the web page, section to create a specific section, and aside which contains elements to put aside the main content of the web page. And lastly we have the article. Anyways, if you look at the screen, we have these two images. So on the left, we have a blueprint of a web page. So as you can see that we are only using div as containers, but we do not know what is the purpose of the first div, what is the purpose of the second div, or the div that comes after it. But to the right, we are using semantic elements. Now again, semantics play the same role as div, they are simply containers. But as you can see, we know that the first container is used for creating a header, the second container is used for creating a navigation bar, and then we are creating section, article, and another article to its right. And lastly, at the bottom of the web page, we are creating a footer. So that is how semantics can help us clearly describe the containers of a web page that actually make up the structure of the web page. So coming back to our Visual Studio Code, as you can see that I have created this navigation bar with the help of unordered list, and that is contained inside a div. But I do not know if this div is creating the navigation bar or not. If I were to simply change this from div element to nav element and quickly change the CSS styling, then you can clearly see that there is no difference in appearance because they are just holders for the HTML elements. But looking at the code, we this time have a clear indication that all of these elements are actually creating a navigation bar thanks to this HTML semantic. So that is the main purpose of having HTML semantics. So it is a good practice to use HTML semantic elements rather than using divs and simple span elements. In this video, we are going to talk about the block element display and the inline element display. So every element in the HTML has a default display value, and this value defines how it's tagged with the other elements onto the web page. Now this value depends upon the element type itself. So there are two main types of element display. First off, we have the block element or the block element display and the inline element or the inline element display. So let's start with the block elements first. So basically these are the elements that take the entire width of the screen, and the next element is tagged on the next row or the next line of the web page. So there are multiple block elements that we can utilize onto the web page, starting with the div element. After that, we have the heading elements starting from h1 going up to h6. So as you can see in the output that the div element is placed on a separate line and the heading element is placed on the separate line, even though visibly there is still space in that particular line. So we can say that each block element is tagged vertically. Anyways, after the heading tags, we have the paragraph tag. Moving on, you can see a list of all the block elements. We have the p tag, after that we have the horizontal rule, after that we have the line break, navigation, the ordered list, the unordered list, and the list elements. Now, these are only a few of the block elements in the HTML document. After that, let's discuss the HTML inline elements. Now, these elements take the width as needed on the screen, and the next element is tagged right after it, or we can say that these elements are tagged in a horizontal line onto the web page. Now, a few of the inline elements are the image element, button element, anchor element, span, bold tag, strong, italic, label, input, and so much more. Now, if we were to simply demonstrate the inline elements, so come inside the body of your web page and create a button tag. Now, after the button, we can create an anchor tag, and at the end we can create a simple span tag, and within this span tag I'm going to simply type that this is a span element. So as soon as I save my program, you can clearly see on the web page that all of these elements have been tagged horizontally. So that is the major difference between the block elements and the inline elements. But what if you want to display all of these inline elements as block elements onto the web page? Well, you can easily do that by wrapping the inline element inside a div element. Now the thing with div container is that it places a line before and after its own element. So if I wanted this span element inside a new line, then I would wrap it inside a div container, just like that. But if this seems a little complicated for you, then you can simply change the default display value of the element in the CSS. But we will go over that in the CSS section. Anyways, that was it for this video. So in this video, we're going to talk about the HTML entities. So basically there are some special characters that are reserved in HTML. And if you want to write something just like less than sign and greater than sign in a paragraph, so how would you write it? For example, if I were to simply create a p tag and I wanted to display this sentence as it is, that I want to write, then hello inside less than and greater than symbols, after that I just type as it is. So as soon as I save a program, you can clearly see that I got the output I want to write, and then it took this hello as a tag or an element, but it could not find that element inside the HTML because there is no such element in HTML. So it printed out that I want to write as it is. Now to show these entities or these symbols as it is, what you need to do is that you need to provide their code. So if I want to print out this less than symbol, then I would type in and then LT standing for less than and then a semicolon. After that, I can remove this less than symbol right before the word hello, and then if I save my program, I will get the output that I want to write hello wrapped inside less than and greater than symbol as it is. So that's one way of doing it. We can also add and GT and then a semicolon to add in the greater than symbol. So basically we are using the abbreviations of the name of that particular symbol, but we can also use the number of that symbol. So the less than symbol has a number of 60. So if I want to write the number of a particular symbol, then what I would do is that I would write the character and followed up by the hash symbol and then the number of that particular symbol, which can be 60. So that would give us the same exact output. So let me show you a few more entities by using their names. So if I were to simply type in that I want to write and copy and then a semicolon, so basically this is going to give us a copyright symbol onto the web page, just like that. Other than the copyright symbol, we can also write a registered or trademark symbol by simply typing in and followed up by REG and then semicolon. So we have the registered trademark symbol. Now there are a lot of HTML entities and I'm not going to explain all of them. So if you really want to display such characters, then now you know what to Google. Now obviously you don't have to memorize all of them. Anyways, we have ended our HTML section successfully, so give yourself a pat on the back for sticking around and practicing till now. Now if you really want to get good with all of the elements that we have learned so far, make sure to practice every day. Anyways, at the end of this section, I also have a bonus video about HTML before starting the CSS section, which is going to be actually the interesting section of this course. Well, in this video, we are going to again talk about the HTML meta element that provide details about the web page. So basically, if you create a meta tag with a name equal to robot, and then in the content attribute, you can pass in indexation controlling parameters. Now what do we mean by this? Basically, the content is going to provide the commands to search engine crawlers about how to crawl the web page content. We have 4 different indexation controlling parameters. We have the noIndex, index, follow and nofollow. Starting off with noIndex, it tells the search engine not to index the page, and the index does the exact opposite. It tells the search engine to index a page. Now the index parameter is set by default, so you do not need to add it inside the meta tag. Anyways, next up we have the follow parameter. So basically, even if the page isn't indexed, the crawler should follow all the links on a page and pass equity to the linked pages. While the nofollow does the exact opposite. It tells the crawler not to follow any links on a page or pass along any link equity. Now if you add in noIndex and nofollow, this would basically mean that your website won't even show up in the search result of any search engine. So this was the meta tag with the name being robots. Could really help the SEO of your website. Anyways, that was all about this video. Welcome to section number 3, which is CSS. Now we are already familiar with HTML elements, and now what we want to do is that we want to beautify them with the help of CSS. So we want to create amazing websites so that the users can be awed. So to do that, we are going to learn CSS, which we are going to do in this section. And now in this section, we are going to talk about CSS. So let's talk about what is CSS. So basically, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. And I'm pretty sure by hearing the name and the points that I've mentioned again and again, that you must be clear that it is used for styling your web page. It makes the website attractive by changing colors, layout, style, size and other factors in terms of styling the website. Anyways, let's talk about the basis of CSS. Well, CSS 1 was introduced in 1996, CSS 2 was introduced in 1998, and the current version of CSS is CSS 3, which was introduced in 2014. However, the CSS 3 is a better version of CSS 1 with bug fixes, more features, new fonts, new colors, extra properties and so much more. Now we can use the same CSS style sheet with many HTML pages, so that way CSS saves our time and cost. Now at the end of this video, I will show you how CSS can completely change the look of a web page. Now that we have an idea of what CSS is and what it will do, then let's talk about how to attach your website or how to attach a CSS with your web page. So basically we have 3 different types of CSS. One is known as the inline CSS, which we have used in the past. The other one is known as the internal or the embedded CSS. And the third one is known as the external CSS. So let's head over to the Visual Studio Code and let's try them one by one. So starting off with the inline CSS. So suppose that you have this h1 tag and you want to style it to a different color. Then what I can do is that in this tag, I'm going to attach the style attribute. And then I'm going to type in the CSS code to style this h1 tag right inside this element. So as you can see that my h1 tag says to style it with CSS. So I'm going to come inside the style attribute. So basically you start with the property that you want to attach to this h1 tag. So I want to attach a specific color. So I will type color, then a colon. After that, I'm going to type in the value for this color property. So I'm going to type in dark green. Now we have already talked about colors in HTML elements. So now if I save my program, you can clearly see that the color has been changed to dark green. I can change it to anything other than dark green as well. So I can change it to blue if I prefer that. Now if you want to attach in multiple values to this h1 tag or any element of the HTML document, then what you need to do is that you need to place in the semicolon after each property, and then you can add the other property that you would like on that particular element. For example, if I want to add in the background color as well, I would simply put a semicolon, then a space, then background color, then a colon, then I would attach a value with this property. Now as soon as I hit save, you can clearly see that we have a background and a foreground with this HTML element. Now the thing is that styling the whole web page with a plenty of HTML elements with the inline CSS is hectic and messy. So suppose that I want to show a lot of elements, so I can just duplicate this tab and add in different properties with all of these. So it's not going to just be color and the background color, it can be the text align and it can be the text size or the font size. So this whole demo.html is going to look very messy. So the better way is to use the internal CSS. So let's talk about the internal CSS. So now suppose that I have these elements onto the HTML document and I want to style them separately. So what I can do is that I can come outside the body element and then create the style element, which we have done in the previous video as well. But this time around we're going to explain what it does. So basically this style element is going to tell the browser that okay, you need to pick up the styling from this element, and this element can be placed inside the body element as well and inside the head element as well. So now if you want to give a separate background color and a color to the entire body of my web page, then I can simply type in body, follow it up with curly braces, and inside these curly braces I am going to type in my CSS code. So I want to change the background color of my entire body element. So I'm going to type in background color, put a colon, and then the color that I want to give. After that, we can also provide a foreground color. So now if I head on over to my browser, we can see that we have the background color as black and we have the foreground color as gold. So that was the styling of my entire body element. But what if I want to give a different text align to the h1 element, different font family, and different font style and font size to h2 elements? For that, what I can do is that I can come inside this style element. After the body styling, I'm going to simply type in h1, follow it up with curly brackets, and in this curly brackets, I'm going to give my text styling. So we have text align to basically align the text inside the web page. So I can set it equal to center. After that, I have the font family, which actually defines the family of the font that it is going to use. So for the value of the font family, I'm going to set it equal to Sega UI. After that, basically, what if your browser does not contain this font family? So in that particular case, what you want to do is that you want to provide a different set of font families. What this does is that if the browser does not contain this font family in its cache, then it can use the other fonts available in that browser. But you need to define that font family as well. So what we do, or what the good practice is, to provide a set of 3 or more. So I'm going to type in other font families that are to be used in case the browser does not have the Sega UI. So now if I save my code and head on over to the output on the browser, we can see that the h1 tag is styled differently, or the font of the h1 tag is now styled very differently. Now let's style all of these h2 elements as well. So for that, I'm going to head outside of this curly bracket, type in my h2 element. After that, I'm going to type in curly brackets, and in here I'm going to simply set the font style and the font size within this h2 element. So I have the property as font size and I'm going to give it medium. After that, I'm going to use the property font style and I'm going to give it the property of italic. So now if I save my code and head on over to the output, we can see that the font size is now medium and this text is now italicized. Again, to basically style the elements that you want, or to style a particular property of the element, what you do is that you type the property, you put a colon, and then you define the value of that property. And if you want to give multiple properties, you separate them with the help of a semicolon. So after the internal CSS, we have the external CSS. So basically, external CSS simply means that the CSS is contained inside a separate file. The benefit of the external CSS is that you can use the same CSS for styling multiple pages at the same time. So if you simply copy this entire content of the style element, and we also remove the style elements as well, come over to the file explorer, and while staying inside the same directory, create a new file, name it style.css. Make sure whenever you're trying to create an external CSS file, the extension should always be .css. After that, you're going to paste in all of your styling within this file. Now, if I save my HTML page and the CSS page, and if I open up my browser, you can see that I do not have any styling. And the reason for that is my CSS file is not linked with demo.html. Now to link this with our HTML, what we're going to do is that we're going to head inside the head element, and then we're going to create a link element. So we're going to set the rel attribute to style sheet, and then in the href we're going to pass in the path to this style.css. So since we are working in the same directory, we can simply type in the path as // and then style.css. Now as soon as I save my program and open up my browser, you can see that the CSS styling has been applied. Again, using inline CSS is a quick and short way of adding CSS to your HTML elements, and the internal CSS is a little bit better than the inline CSS as it reduces the mess. But the best way to use CSS in a bigger project or a much bigger scale application is to use the external CSS. So that was all about getting started with CSS. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to precisely select an element, because as you see on the output, we had these three H2 elements, but we were not able to separately style them. What if we wanted to style H2 elements in a certain way, and even after that we wanted to style this one particular element a certain way as well? So that can be done with the help of selectors and combinators, which we are going to talk about in the next video. So in this video, let's quickly talk about the CSS comments. So just like the HTML comments, the CSS comments are added to help the developer understand the CSS styling. So at line number 20, what if I want to explain the next developer that the code right after this line is about styling the th element or the head of the table. Now to create a comment, what you do is you simply type in a /, then followed up by an asterisk symbol. After that, you type in the comment no matter what it is, and then you need to finish off the comment by simply typing an asterisk and then followed up by a /. Now in HTML there was a different way of creating multi-line comments, but in CSS if you simply want to create multi-line comments, then what you do is you simply do not complete the comment and write multi-line comments according to your wants. Just like that, you have also created multi-line comments. So basically you need to start the comment with /* and end the comment with asterisk and then /. In this video, we will talk about the CSS margin, padding and border. So basically we are going to talk about the CSS box model. So all the HTML elements are considered boxes. Now to clearly see the box model, we are going to open up our browser and then head inside the inspect element. After that, if we come over to style property and scroll down, you can see that we have the box model. So let me select one particular element. So I'm going to click on this button and then click on my H1 tag. And now if I scroll down, you can see that I have the content or the exact size of that particular element. So there are a few things that you can clearly notice. So in the very middle, we have the content itself, and its size is mentioned right over here. It's 456 by 32. And outside the content, we have the padding. So padding is basically the white spaces between the border and the content. And outside the padding, we have the border itself, and then we have margin, which is by default placed by the browser if that element is a block element. Again, if that element is not a block element but an inline element like span, then we will not have this margin placed by default by the browser. Now we can confirm that by simply selecting this anchor tag, which is actually an inline element. So as you can see that we have no values for the margin, no values for the border and no values for the padding. Now what if you want to place in these values? Well, we can do that in the CSS, or we can do that right inside the inspect element. So let me just scroll down for the style, and in this tab which says element.style, we can type in the values for margin, border, padding, or basically any CSS styling that we want to apply on this particular element. Anyways, let's start with the H1 element and let's try giving it a different margin. So we're going to head inside this element.style, and by the way, whatever changes that you make inside this inspect element are not permanent. They are just for you to see how they would look like on the actual web browser. Anyways, we are going to set the margin property to a different value. So type in margin and then type a different value. So I'm just going to give it a margin of 5 pixels. After that, simply hit enter, and if I scroll down, we can clearly see that we have defined the margin for all sides equal to 5 pixels. Now what if you want to give different margin size to different sides of this element? Well, you can do that by simply typing in the margin value for each side. So for that, we would type in margin, and then the first value that we are going to type is for the top margin. So for the top, I want the margin to be 1 pixel. After that, give it a space and then type in the value for the right margin. So for the right margin, I want the value to be 2 pixels. And the third is the value for the bottom margin, which I want it to be 3 pixels. And the last value is actually of the left margin, which I want to be of 4 pixels. After that, simply hit enter. So now if I scroll down, you can clearly see that we have different values for margin for different sides. And again, the approach for placing the values for margin is kind of like the clockwise approach. So we have the top, then right, then bottom, then left. After that, we can also try placing in only 3 values. So the first value would correspond to the top value, the second value is for both of the sides, and the third value is for the bottom. So if I hit enter and scroll down, you can clearly see that the first value has gone to the top, the second to the sides, and the third to the bottom. And if we place in only 2 values, then the first value would go to bottom and top, the second value would go to the sides left and right, just like that. So that is how you can give different margin size to the HTML element. And you can use the same approach to give different values to padding of an HTML element, just like this. So just like that, I have given different values to padding of this HTML element. Now if I scroll down and if I hover over only the padding is actually highlighted onto the output. Same goes for the margin. Now let's try giving a different border value to this element. Now giving a different border to different sides is actually a little bit complicated because we have to use multiple properties for that. We cannot just type in border and then provide values for all individual sides of that element. If we want to provide a border to the bottom, then we would have to use the property border-bottom. And then in this property, you need to type in the values for the color, that can be blue. After that, you need to specify the type of the border, it can be solid or it can be dotted. So I'm just going to go with solid, and then you need to specify the size of this border or the width of this border. So I'm just going to go with 2 pixels. Now if I want to apply a border at the top of this element, then I would have to use the property border-top and then the same 3 values. Similarly, we can give border to right and the left side. So that is how you can apply a border to all 4 sides of an element. Anyways, that was all about margin, padding and border. Now we can use them to make our content beautifully aligned with the web page, and that is also their main purpose. In this video, we're going to talk about the CSS box sizing. So basically in the previous video we saw about the CSS box model. Now we know that each element on the HTML document has a specific margin, border and a padding around it. Now all of this is added so that it can contain its content. Now while making the website responsive, we face an issue that the content actually appears in contrast to our expectations. This basically means that if we create a div or an element of a specific height and then we add in some margin or some border or some padding, the actual height of that element changes or the actual width of that element changes. So why is that so? Well, we are going to learn that in this video. So as you can see on the VS Studio Code, I have created these 2 divs. So I have given the class div1 to one div and the other one div2. If I were to tell you that regardless of the output on the browser, these 2 divs have the same height value and the same width value, then you would not agree with me. And I would have to prove you wrong by simply going over to the style.css and then showing you that I have given the same height and the same width. But the only difference is that for div2 I have also given a padding of 25 pixels. That is why this padding is making this entire element, which I have named as div2, go beyond our expectation of 100 pixels in height and 100 pixels in width. Now why is that so? Well, that is because of the CSS box sizing method. By default, the CSS box sizing method is set to be content box, which means that the actual width of the element or the actual height of the element is calculated by using the width of the element plus the padding plus the border. The same goes for the width, it's height plus padding and plus the border. So what if we want to create a responsive website and we do not want to do extraordinary CSS styling? Well, we can easily get along with it by simply choosing the other CSS box sizing method, which is the CSS border box. So if I come over to my style.css page and if I simply add in box sizing property and set it equal to border box for both of these divs, then you can see that both of these divs are now of the same height and of the same width. But the content, however, is placed at different locations. Now this is because when you set the box sizing to border box, the padding is actually added within the entire height or the entire width of the element. This means that the padding pushes the content of the element a little bit downwards or little to the side according to the padding on which side you are adding. So that was basically the CSS box sizing. Now using the border box does not guarantee the responsiveness of your web page. This is actually the first step towards making a responsive website. Now what you can also do is that you can use a universal selector just like this, And then you can set the box sizing of the entire HTML document to border box. This ensures that you are on the first step of making your website responsive. The other way or the next step is to use relative measurements, which we're going to talk about in the next video. In this video, we're going to talk about the CSS units that are used for expressing the length of an HTML element. So there are multiple properties that take length values such as width, margins, padding, font size, height, and the list goes on and on. But majorly, if we talk about the length values, it has two different categories. We have the absolute length and then we have the relative length. Now to better display this, we are going to clear up our HTML document. And in here, we're going to simply show an image. Now the source is going to be dog.jpg. So basically, I have downloaded this image and placed it inside the same folder as my demo.html page. So this is the output on my page. Now let's talk about the absolute length. So basically these units are fixed and they will appear the same no matter which browser or the device that you're using. So absolute length units are not recommended for use on screen because screen sizes vary so much. It can vary from device to device. However, they can be used if the output medium is known, such as for the print layout. Now if you were to talk about the absolute length, then let me just come over to the CSS and let me just use the image element selector, and in here I can use the absolute length as inches. So for that I can simply type width is equals to 2 inches. So to explain 2 inches, I would simply have to type in the keyword in, and then I can set the height as 2 inches as well. So as soon as I save this, so you can clearly see that the dimensions of the image have changed. So in 1 inch we have 96 pixels, or we can say that we have 2.54 centimeter. Other than this, we have pixels. Now we have been using pixels up until this point. Now to define something in pixels, we simply have to type in the number of the pixels that we want and then the keyword px, that would mean pixels. So I'm going to change its height to 20 pixels. Even though pixels are used to define the absolute length, but they can still be relative according to the viewing device. For example, for low DPI devices, we have far lesser pixels available for that particular device. And if we talk about a high-end device, then we have much more pixels to be utilized for the web page. Anyways, 1 pixel actually means 1 device pixel of the display. And for printers and high resolution screens, 1 pixel implies multiple device printers. Next up, after the pixels, we have points. So actually 1 point means the 72nd part of an inch. So it's 1/72. So if I were to define this image in terms of points, I can simply type in the height equal to 1 and then pt standing for points. So if I save that, you can see that we have this very tiny height. Let's change the height a little bit. Let's change it to 20 points. Now after the points, we have picas. Now 1 picas is equals to 12 points. So instead of using 40 points, we could just use like 5 picas. And to define picas, we simply type in the keyword pc and then hit save. Anyways, those were all of the absolute length units that we can utilize. But again, those units are not good for responsive website. For example, if I were to simply change the width to let's say 20 inches and the height to 20 inches as well, then my whole image would get extremely large. So to view this properly, I would have to set the zoom to only 25% or maybe 33%. But that is not a good approach while creating a responsive website. Anyways, let's talk about the relative length units. So the relative length units specify a length relative to another length property. Now this may sound a little complicated, but stick around and I will remove the confusion. Anyways, so the relative length units scale differently while rendering on different mediums. So we have all of these relative length units. So we have M, EX, CH, REM, VW, VH, VMin, VMax, and lastly we have percentage. Now you can see their purpose right next to their name, but we are going to explain only 5 of them. So let's get started with the first one, which is the percentage. So the percentage is relative to its parent element. So if I head on over to my demo.html file, we can see that our image has only one parent, that is the body element. So if you were to use some percentage sizing, that would mean the percentage or that percentage that I've defined of this body element. For example, if I were to go to this width property and I were to type in simply 80%, then this would mean 80% of the entire body. And same goes for the height. If I want the height to be 40% of my parent element, which is the body, then it is going to scale itself relatively. Now what if we change the parent? First of all, let me just bring my zoom to default. Now let's try giving this image element a parent. So let's head back to the HTML document and let's create a div. After that, we are going to simply take this image element and place it inside this div. Now our image element has the parent as div element and the div element has the parent body element. Now if we head back over to our CSS, this time around we are going to select the div element and give its size according to its parent, which is the body element. So this time around I'm going to set the width 80% of the body, and then I want the height to be 50% of the entire height of the body. So as soon as I do this, the dimensions of the image change even though we have not messed around with any of these values. So why is that so? Well, basically this time around the 80% width of the image is taken as the 80% of the entire viewport of this div, whereas the viewport of this div is actually 80% of the body element. So that is why this is a little complicated, but still it is used to create responsive websites. To again understand the difference between parents, let me just remove the styling for this parent of the image element, which is div. So if I simply comment it out and then save my program, you can see that the dimensions of the image change. And if I uncomment it out and then save again, the dimensions of the image change again. Anyways, that was the percentage length units. Now after the percentage, we have the EM or M. Now EM is used to set the size relative to the font size of the parent element. Now to better demonstrate this, we are going to remove this div as the parent of our image. After that, we are going to give our image the width equal to, let's say, 50 EM, and then we are going to give it a height of 50 EM as well. Now like I've mentioned before that 1 EM means the size of its parent font. That means that this image has the parent body, and 1 EM means the font size of the body element. So if I were to simply head inside this body tag or this body styling and then change the font size to something like, let's say, 5 pixel, and then save my CSS, then you can clearly see that the dimensions of the image change. Now this was because the default size of the font of the body element is actually 16 pixels. So we have actually reduced the size of the font, thus reducing the size of our image. So that was EM length unit in CSS. Now it has the same drawback as the percentages, meaning that if a particular element has multiple parents, or basically we can say grandparents, then the sizing or the relative sizing becomes really complex. For example, let's again add in the div element as the parent of our image element. Now remember that the font size of the body, which is the grandparent, is actually 5 pixels. After that, we are going to change the font size of our div, which is the exact or the direct parent of our image element. So let's set its font size equal to 10 pixels. So now as soon as I save my CSS, you can clearly see the dimensions of my image change. Now this is a little bit complicated because calculating the value of EM becomes complicated. Now this is because previously when we did not have this div element, 1 EM was equal to 5 pixels. But now since we have included another div element as the parent of our image, now 1 EM is equals to 10 pixels. So that is why being sure of the EM value inside a nested element state is very difficult. So that is also one of the drawbacks of using EM as the relative length units. Next up we have the REM, which is basically relative EM. So in REM, the size is relative to the font size of the root element, and it does not matter which is the parent of our main element. For example, if I were to simply change this EM, which is 50 EM, to REM, then this would mean that 1 REM is now equal to the root element's font size. Now you might be wondering that the root element should be the body element. Well, that is not the case. The root element is actually the HTML element. So if we want to change the font size of the root element, then we will have to get the HTML element and then change the font size inside that. So let's set it equal to 10 pixels. So that is how you can use REM. But this still creates a bit of a problem. So what if you have a picture or you want to place an element, let's say of the height 250 pixels and of the width 100 pixels, and you would have to calculate it using some weird and complicated calculations. Well, there is a trick. If you simply set the root element's font size to 62.5%, then 10 pixels equal to 1 rem. So now if I want to set the width to 100 pixels, that would mean I would simply set it equal to 10 rem. And if I want to set the height to 250 pixels, then I would set the rem to 25. Anyways, the EM and the rem units are practical in creating a perfectly scalable layout. Even though right now it may seem a little bit complicated, but with a little bit of practice you can clearly get a hang of the EM and the rem length units. Anyways, next up we have the viewport. Now viewport is the entire area of the web browser that is available for viewing a particular element or the entire HTML document. So this whole area that is covered in black is our viewport of the browser. Now 100 viewport, or let's say VH, which stands for viewport height, means 100% of the viewport's height. And if I simply change it to VW, then this means that 100% of the viewport's width. Now this is extremely useful when you want to create responsive designs for different screens. Anyways, let's set the height equal to 50% of our viewport height, so it would be 50 VH, and then let's set the width equal to 25% of the available viewport's width. So if I save this program, so you can clearly see the height is exact half of my entire viewport, while the width is 1/4 of the entire width of my browser. So now if I full screen my browser, you can see that the width and the height changes. So that is how you can create responsive layouts with the help of relative length units. In this video, we are going to talk about the CSS Display Properties. Now we have already talked about the block display property and the inline display property. But what if we want an element to have the properties of both of them? Well, let's go and talk about all of these properties one by one. So you can see in the HTML code that I have created a parent div which contains 5 other divs, and the output is being displayed onto the browser as well. But you can see that each individual div has been granted a specific background color so that we can see the entire width or the height that the div is taking. So let's talk about how to first convert a block element into an inline element. So we already know that divs are block elements. This means that they take up the entire width of the browser, which is also clearly visible from the output and with the help of the background color. Now if we wanted to change this block of A or the A block to be an inline element, then what we would do is that we would use the display property and set its value equal to inline. So after doing that, you can clearly see the background color reduces to the only area for the content. But still, the inline elements actually stack horizontally, but it is not doing so. And that is because the B block actually is a block element, so that is why it is adding a row before the element and after the element as well. So now if I want to display this B block right next to the A block, then I would have to change the display property of the B block as well. So let me just change it to display into inline. So just like that, both of the blocks, the A block and the B block, are being stacked horizontally. But what if now I want to specify the height and the width of these inline blocks? So let's try giving them a height value and a width value. So now as you can see that I have given them a height and a width of 3 rem each. But if I save my CSS, you can see that nothing happens to the actual height and the actual width of the element. Now this is one of the properties of the inline block display. Basically, you cannot provide the values for width and height because inline elements only take the height and the width required by their content. But what if we were to give these same values to the other elements which are block element? So let me just copy the values for width and height and paste them inside the third block, the fourth block, and the fifth block. So now if I save my CSS file, you can clearly see that the height and the width settings have been applied to the block element block C, D, and E. But what if I want this C block to be in line with A and B, but I still want the C block to have its own height and width? For that, we also have a display property, and that display property is known as the inline block. So let me just change the property to inline block. So you can clearly see that the C block has been stacked horizontally with the A block and the B block, but it still retains its own height and width. After the inline block property, we have another property which is equal to none. So what this property does is that it removes the element from the HTML document. So if I were to simply save this CSS file, you can clearly see that the D block has been removed from the HTML document. Now other than these properties, we also have the flex display property. The flex display property is a little bit complicated, but it provides you with a little bit more features than we get with the other display properties. Now to use the flex display property, as you can clearly see that I have removed the display properties from all of the inner divs or the children divs, and I have placed the display property inside the parent div and I have set it equal to flex. After that, we get multiple attributes or properties with the flex that we can use to justify or style the layout of our content onto the web page. So we're going to start with the first one. So the first one is going to be the flex direction. So as you can see in the output, the content is stacked horizontally, or we can say that in a form of a row. That is the default setting of the flex direction. Now what if I want to stack it horizontally but in the reverse order? Well, we can easily do that with the help of flex direction property and setting its value equal to row-reverse. So now if I save my program, you can clearly see the content have been flipped the other way around. After that, what if I want to actually stack it vertically or inside a column? Then I can simply set the value of the flex direction property equal to column and then save my program, and my boxes will be stacked vertically or inside a column. Again, I can use the column reverse if I want to stack the content in the reverse order, just like that. Other than that, we have the flex wrap, but for that we would have to change the width of the parent element, so we will do that at the end. Anyways, let's talk about the justify content property. So the justify content property is used to align the content or all of the elements along the x-axis. So if I were to simply use justify content and set its value equal to center, so this would justify or place the content at the center of the x-axis. Now there are multiple values that we can use inside the justify content. For starters, we have the flex start, which is actually the default value, which will mean that the content starts from the flex direction, which in our case is actually the default, meaning the row. After that, we have the flex end, which means that it is going to be placed at the end of the flex direction, so at the end of the row. After that, we have center that we have already defined, and after that we have the options to place the content with the help of spaces. So first around we have the space around. This basically means that it is going to place a space around each content or the each element inside our parent element, just like that. Other than this, what if we want to place even spaces around our elements? So we have space evenly, that places even spaces around each element. Other than this, what if we do not want the spaces at the end of the row or at the start of the row? For that, we have the space between. It is only going to add the spaces between the elements, not the start or the end of the row. So now if I save my program, I get spaces between the elements of my parent element. Now, other than this, other than the justify content, we have the align items. Now the align items is used to align the elements along the y-axis. So let me just type in the property name, which is align item, and then we have different values. So at first we have stretch. So stretch basically means take the entire width that you need. Other than that, we have the baseline. Baseline is almost identical to stretch. It basically means that you can take the baseline width of the element. Other than that, we have the center. This basically means to align the elements in the center of the y-axis, just like that. So you can see that the center of each element is placed at the center of the viewport of the browser. Other than this, we again have the flex start. So this basically means to align it in the direction of the flex direction. Other than that, it's the flex end, which basically means that it is going to place it at the end of the y-axis. After the align items, what we can do is that we can set its value equal to center to align it in the center of the y-axis, and then we can use the justify content to align the content in the center of the x-axis as well. And then to make it even more prettier, we can again duplicate the justify content and then use space around and then save my program to get this beautiful output of blocks onto my web page. So the possibilities of using a flex display is almost infinite. After that, let's again talk about the flex wrap. Now to demonstrate flex wrap, we need to reduce the size of width of our parent element, which means this box div. So let me just set its width. Let's set it equal to 100 pixels. After that, let me remove the justify content and the align items. Now we are going to talk about the wrapping. The wrapping, as the name sounds, it is going to wrap the content in the next rows. But the question is, why do we want to do that? Basically, if you look at the output, the elements or the items are not taking the width that they actually need. So for that we have wrapping. So to use this property, simply write flex-wrap and then set it property equal to either no wrap, which is the default, or wrap, and then save the program, and you can see that the elements have been wrapped into the next rows. Now we can also use wrap reverse just so the content is in the reverse order, just like that. Now along with wrapping, we can also use the align content property, which is going to align the wrapped content. So we have stretch, which is the default. After that we have center. After the center we again have the flex start, flex end, and we know what they do. And then we have the spaces, so we have space around and space between, just like that. Anyways, those were the display properties of the CSS. What you need to do now is you need to practice all of these display properties to actually get good at CSS. In this video, we are going to talk about the CSS positioning option that you have in again CSS. So let's start with why even positioning is used. Up until this point, all of the elements that we were showing onto the HTML document were being either stacked horizontally or vertically. But what if we want them to be displayed at a particular position onto the web page? Well, that can be achieved with the help of CSS positioning. Now there are different types of positioning. We have the relative, static, fixed, absolute, and sticky. So we'll talk about them one by one. So coming from where we left off in the last video, we had these boxes displayed onto our web page. Now what we are going to do is that we are going to apply different types of positioning on different boxes. So we are going to start off with the static positioning. So by default, all the HTML elements are set to static positioning, which basically means that if I came over to box 1 and type top and then 300 pixels, which basically means that you are going to now place this particular item 300 pixels from the top. So that is how you also define the distance from either top, left, right or bottom. But if I save my code, you can see that nothing actually happens. And this is because the positioning attribute, which is this one, is actually set to static. So that is why we cannot position it according to what we want. Anyways, if we really want to place it at 300 pixels from the top, what we can do is we can set this position attribute to fixed. After that, you can see it that the first box, that is box number A, has been placed 300 pixels from the top. But there is another thing about the fixed positioning, and that is if you scroll, it is going to stay at 300 pixels from the top of the browser window. So to demonstrate this, what we're going to do is we're going to come over to HTML and we're going to create another div that says Google, and let's just give it a class like box 6. After that, we're going to head inside the CSS and we are also going to position this box 6 and let's say at 1000 pixels from the top. So we have given it the position relative, which we'll talk about in just a minute, given it the top value as 1000 pixels. So right now, it is placed at the bottom of this web page. As we can say that it is fixed at 300 pixels from the browser window, and at the end of the page we have this Google div right over here. After that, let's talk about the relative positioning. So what is this relative positioning that we have used to place a certain element at a certain place of the web page, not on the browser? So basically, the HTML element with the CSS position set to relative changes its position with respect to its original position on the web page, not on the browser. So that is why when we set the position of this box number 6 to 1000 pixels, this meant that it is going to place itself at 1000 pixels from the top on the web page rather than 300 pixels from the top to the browser window. So that is the difference between fixed and relative. After that, we have another positioning which is known as the absolute positioning. So the element with the absolute position is changed with respect to the parent element. For example, we know that this box class is the parent element of all of the other boxes. So what now we are going to do is we're going to come over to box 2, set the position equal to absolute, and after that we're going to provide the top positioning as top. Let's set it equal to 25 pixels and then left at let's say 50 pixels. So now you can see that this B box has been placed with respect to its parent, which is the div in which it is contained. And it is not moving around when we scroll the page because it is contained inside its parent element. After that, we have the sticky positioning. So let me just set the positioning of box 3 to sticky. After that, I'm going to place it at 0 pixels from the top and 100 pixels from the left. So my box number C comes from here. Now with sticky positioning, it is going to act as a fixed positioning and relative at the same time. Now what do I mean by this? Basically, if I were to scroll right now, it is going to stick with the scroll until the end of its parent. And after that, it is going to become relative and stay where it left off. So now when I scroll back up, it is going to stick with the browser window until it reaches its original position. So we can also say that the sticky elements or the sticky positioning basically toggles between fixed and relative at the same time. Anyways, those were the different positioning options that we get with CSS.
Welcome to the next section of projects. In this section, we are going to actually implement the information that we have learned throughout this course. So we are going to do two simple projects. The first one is going to be an HTML form and the other one is going to be a glass UI, which was very popular back in the day. So let's get started with the first project.
So in this first project, we are actually going to duplicate this entire website. So as you can see that we have the home page that says baby fever, and then we have another page that says order now, and on this page we have this beautifully looking form. So we are going to create this in HTML and CSS. So let's get started. Now to start off, create your first index.html file. After that, also create the index.css file. Now inside the index.html, create your boilerplate, change the title, and after that, inside the body, we are going to create the navigation bar. Now in the navigation bar, we are going to create an unordered list, and inside this unordered list, we are going to have two list items. So the first list item is going to say home and the second one is going to say order or order now. Now to read that to the user, we are going to wrap this home and the order now inside the anchor tag.
I'm going to set the path for the home to index.html, and for the order page I'm going to create a new file whose name I'm going to set as order.html, but we will create that file later on in this video. And after the navigation bar, we're going to create a main semantic element and we're going to give it a specific class. Let's call this class as text. After that, within this main element, we're going to create a new div, and within this div, we are going to first create an h1 element and we're going to simply say baby fever. After that, we are going to create a p tag or the p element to simply say shop best products for your baby. After that, let's simply click on the go live button to actually get the output from our HTML file. Anyways, we have all the elements that we wanted to show on the home page. Now all we have to do is that we need to customize or style this navigation bar, and we also need to style the name of our shop and the tagline. So let's head inside the index.css file. Starting off in the CSS file, we are going to set the margin and padding of the entire web page to 0. For that, we are going to use the universal selector and do margin equal to 0, and same goes for padding, so we're going to set it equal to 0 as well. Other than that, we're going to give a specific color for everything on this page. So the color that we're going to use is going to be 1C3879. After that, we want to make our website responsive. So for that, we are going to be using the length units as rem. And like I've talked about in the previous video, what we're going to do is that we're going to take the main element of the web page, which is HTML, and set its font size equal to 62.5%, so that we can easily calculate the rem length units. Anyways, moving inside the body tag, we are going to give it some custom styling. So starting off with the minimum height of the body, we are going to set it equal to 100 view height. Once that is done, we are going to provide it a custom background. So for the background, I'm going to be using the RGB coloring, and the RGB values are 88, 17 and 89. After that, we want to have a linear gradient on the background. For that, we're going to use the background property and set it equal to linear gradient, and in the linear gradient, we're first going to define the direction of the gradient. So let's set it equal to 90 degrees. After that, we're going to type the colors to be used as the gradient. So we are going to be using RGBA values, and the values are going to be 88, 17, 89 and the opacity as 0.5. After that, let's add two more colors for this gradient. So RGBA 121, 9, 62 and the opacity as 0.3. After that, again RGBA, and the third color is going to be 255, then 0, then 78, then the opacity as 0.2. Now as you can see that nothing is actually happening onto the output of the browser. Now that is because we have not linked our CSS file within our HTML. So let's head inside the head element and create a link tag, and then we are going to add the index.csl with this. Now as soon as we do this, we have some styling applied on our web page. After that, let's actually style our navigation bar. We are going to be using the nav tag and then unordered list inside that tag. Now the very first thing that we are going to change within this styling is the padding, and we are going to set it equal to 1.5 rem. After that, we are going to change the background color. We are going to set it equal to 432C7A, so that we have this navigation bar. Once that is done, we are going to change the display equal to flex, so that we have the items displayed in a horizontal row. Now to make sure of that, we are going to set the flex direction to row as well. And lastly, we are going to change the font size to 1.5 rem. Now if you were to look closely, we can see our text written right over here, but the color is very weird, so we are going to change that one by one. First of all, let's access the li element or the li tag, and let's change the list style to none. After that, inside the list item, we are going to apply some styling on each anchor tag. So we're going to change the color to white. Once that is done, we're going to align the text inside the center, and after that, we're going to put the padding. The top and the bottom padding is going to be 1 rem, and the left and the right padding is going to be 3 rem. After that, we're going to change the text decoration to none. After that, whenever we hover over the anchor tags, we want to apply some kind of animation or some change within the text. Now to do that, we're going to access the anchor tag using the list items, and we're going to access the hover property with the help of a colon. And within this property, we're going to change the font family to fantasy. After that, we want to change the color to something that is different than white. So we are going to use EAE3D2. And upon hovering, we also want to increase the default text size of the font. So we're going to change the font size to, let's say, 1.6 rem. Just like that. Now when we hover over the icons, you can see that the font family changes and the color is slightly different from the white as well, and the text size also increases. So that is our navigation bar done. After that, we want to better style the main section of our web page. So let's access the main element and then let's style it differently. First of all, we're going to change the height that it is going to take on the web page to, let's say, 30 view height. After that, let's set the text alignment to center, margins to 1 rem, font size to 1.4 rem. After that, let's give a different color to the h1 tag. So let's access the h1 tag using .text h1 and then give it a different color. Let's give it white. Also, we want to give the same color to the p tag as well. So let's add the p tag over here as well. So that is our styling done for the home page. But what if we want to add in the background image right over here, just like I've shown you in the picture. Now adding a background image would actually make it look like a hero section of a web page. So for that, what we're going to do is that we're going to head inside the index.html and we're going to give a class to this div. So let's give it a different class like text2. After that, let's head back inside the index.css and this time around we are going to access the text2 class, and after that we are going to add the padding equal to 5 rem. And lastly, let's also increase the font size to large, just like that. Now to include the background image, we are going to come inside the main section and use the property which is background image, and after that we are going to use an image from Unsplash. So you can attach any image from unsplash.com. Anyways, to attach an image, you need to use this property which is URL, and then the URL of the image goes between the round parentheses of that particular method. So that is how we can attach the background to our hero section. Now there is still one problem. The heroes section is actually separated from the navigation bar, but the heroes section should be attached with the navigation bar. Now to change this, we are going to change this margin from 1 rem to simply 0. Now that is how the hero section is going to attach itself with this navigation bar. So that is our main page done. After that, let's talk about creating the second page. So open up the Explorer and in here you're going to create a new file. Let's just call it order.html. Now in this file, again create a boilerplate and let's call it order and then the pipe symbol and then baby fever. And now let's click on the order now button and see if our redirection is working or not. Well, it is working, but we do not have anything inside the order.html page. So the very first thing that we want to copy from our index.html page is the navigation bar. So head inside the index.html and copy the entire code for the navigation bar and paste them inside the body of order.html. Now once we have done that, we want to actually reuse the styling that we have done in the index.csl. I have mentioned this in the previous video that you can use the external CSS file with multiple web pages. So simply create a link element and then set the href property equal to /index.css. So now when we open up the order now page, we have this navigation bar along with the background color. After that, let's create a separate CSS file for the form. So let's call that form as form.css. Let's also attach this CSS with this order.html web page. So let's create another link element and this time around we're going to attach form.css. Now within this page we want to create this form. So you can see that this page has a container which contains this form, and this container has a left panel and a right panel. The left panel has an image while the right panel has the contact us form. So let's try to duplicate this. So right underneath the navigation bar, we are going to first create a new div with a name as container. Now inside this container div, we are going to create a new div with the name contact box. Now within this contact box, we are going to have two panels, one for the left and one for the right. So let's create them. Now inside the right panel, we are going to have an h2 element which says contact us. After that, the contact us form is going to have 3 input fields and a text area. So let's create them. So you can see that I have created 3 input fields and 1 text area, and I've given them the same class as field. Other than this, I want to also create a button. So now to create a button, we are going to use the button element, but this time around we are going to set the class of the button equal to bn30. Now you might be wondering, why did I give such a weird name to the class? Well, this is because we are using a custom button made by cssbuttons.app. So if you head on over to cssbuttons.app and select any button that you would like to use on your project, you would get the styling for that particular button. So for CSS button or bn30, we are going to be using the code from CSS buttons, which is this one. Now to add this button to your code, simply copy the CSS styling, and after that we are going to paste this CSS code inside our form.css. So that would be the styling of our button. Anyways, that is how you can use the CSS buttons app to use pre-made buttons in your project. After that, let's simply add some text inside our button. Let's simply say order.
So this is our button that we have got from cssbuttons.app. Other than that, we're all done with the HTML elements that we are going to place inside this order.html file. So let's head to the form.css and let's start styling all the elements of this page. So in this file, we're not going to go over the universal selector as we have already done that in the index.css file. So we are going to start with our container div. So in the container div, we are going to set the position equal to relative. After that, we are going to set the width equal to 70%, the display to flex. We are going to justify the content in the center and align the items in the center as well. After that, we are going to add the padding of 2.5 rem and 8.5 rem. After the container, we are going to be using the pseudo element selector to select the elements after the container. Now inside here, we are going to set the positioning to absolute, and then we are going to set the width and the height to 100%. After that, we also want to attach a background image. For this, we are going to open up the Explorer and create a new folder with images. And within this, I'm going to paste in a background image along with the fav icon. So you can see that we have this one.jpg which we are going to attach as a background. So in the container after, we are going to set background equal to URL, and in the URL we are going to pass in the relative path of our image, that is going to be images wrapped inside quotation marks, and after the URL we are going to simply say no repeat center. After that, let's set the styling of the contact box, so it's .contact-box. Now within this, we are going to first set the display to grid. After that, we are going to set the grid template for columns as 2 and 1 fr. After that, we are going to justify content, align items and text align towards center. Once that is done, we are also going to add a background color. So the background color is going to be FFF for white. After that, we are also going to add in some box shadow. After that, let's style the left panel of our contact box. So for that, we are going to select the left panel using the class left, and in this we are going to first attach the background image. For that, simply type in background and use the URL, and in here type the path to the image. So it's ./image, and in that folder it's one.jpg, and you're also going to set the property to no repeat center. After that, simply set the background size to cover, and lastly simply set the height to 100% to actually display the image. Just like that. After that, we also want to add some padding to the right panel. So access the right panel and add in the padding as 3 rem and 4 rem. After that, let's style this h2 element. So let's access h2 and let's change the position to relative. Let's also add some padding equal to 0, 0 and then 1.3 rem. Once that is done, we're also going to add the margin at the bottom equal to 1 rem and also the font size to 2.5 rem. After that, we are again going to use the pseudo element selector to select the element after the h2. In this, we are going to first set the content equal to blank. After that, we are going to set the position equal to absolute and the distance from left equal to 50%. Once that is done, we are going to add the bottom difference to 0. After that, let's add the height equal to 0.4 rem and width equal to 6 rem. After that, let's actually add in the border radius of 2 rem. And to make it all visible, let's add the background color, and the color that I am going to use is 1C3879. So now we want to place this line right beneath the contact us. So for that, we want to translate it over the x-axis by -50%. So for that, we are going to use the transform property, and in this property we are going to use the translate over x-axis, and we are going to simply type the value as -50%. So that is going to bring it to the center of contact us. After that, we also want to attach the styling to all of these fields. So for that, we had set the name of the class as field. Now for all of these fields, the very first thing that I want to do is that I want to change the width to 100%. After that, I want to add a solid border and the outline to none. So you can see that I have set the alpha value to 0. This means that it is going to remove the border from here. So before the opacity, it was looking something like this, but after the opacity has been reduced to 0, it looks like this. After that, let's also set the outline to none. Now once that is done, we are going to be adding padding, changing the font size and adding the margin at the bottom. And the last thing that I want to do is that I want to attach a background color with the field. So simply type background color and provide a custom background color with the help of RGBA values. And the background color that I'm going with is 230 230 and the opacity 0.9. After that, we want to change the background color of these fields when we hover the mouse over them. So for that, simply select the class field and after that the attribute hover. Now in this, we're going to simply change the background color to RGBA and the values are going to be 0, 0, 0 and 0. So now when I move the cursor over a text field, you can see that the text field actually disappears. We are only left with a placeholder. After that, we also want to add a minimum height to the text area. So simply access the text area using the tag name and apply the minimum height property and set it equal to 14 rem. And lastly, we want to attach some styling when a specific field is in focus. So for that, simply use dot field and then the attribute of focus. After that, simply provide a border of 0.2 rem solid and of a specific color. And the color this time is going to be 30, 85, 250 and the opacity is going to be 0.4. So now when I click on a specific field, you can see that I get this border when the field is in focus. After that, we also want to change the background color when the field is in focus. So simply use the property of background focus and change the color to white. Or instead of white, we can use a custom color like 244, 255 and 254. So now when I click on a particular field, I get this border when the field is in focus and a different background color. So that is basically our entire mini project. So let's go over the home page and let's actually make the browser full screen. So we have our main page which contains the navigation bar for home and order now and a heroes section. Now when we click on the order now button, it takes us to the other page which contains this beautiful form for the user to contact us or actually provide us with their order. And we have even used a custom button from cssbuttons.app. Anyways, that was your first project. Now the thing with this form is that it is responsive, which means that it changes according to the size of the browser, and that is because of the reason that we have used the length units as REM, which is used for responsive web pages. Anyways, in the next video you're going to learn about the Glass UI and you're going to make that as your second mini project of this course. So for the second project, we're actually going to code out this Glass UI with the help of HTML and CSS. So let's begin. So let's start off by creating the HTML file. So I'm just going to call this one as index.html. And in here I'm going to create a boilerplate and I'm going to change the title to mini project 2. After that, I'm also going to create the style.css file. Let me link the CSS. Also, we are going to be using some icons. So as you can see in the image of the output, we are using these icons for the home, code, the videos and even for these social platform. So for that, I'm going to link the Font Awesome website's icons. Now you can see that we are using the version of the CDN equal to 5.15.3. Now you can use the new version if that is available, or if you want to use the same version, then you can find the files of this project attached with this video, so you can copy that from there. Anyways, next up we are going to be using some images. So for that I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this one as images, and in here I'm going to simply copy paste my images that I'm going to use. So you can see that I have this logo for linuxhint and the other one is the fav icon. So let me just quickly link the fav icon. And with that, the head section is done. After that, we're going to move over to the body section. So if we head back over to the output, so you can see that in the background we have this linear gradient of blue and then we have these circles. So let's try creating the background first, and after that we'll move up the layer, meaning that we would create this section of the class UI. So let's start with the background. So for the background, I'm going to use a semantic known as main. In this, I'm going to contain my section as well, section for the class I mean, and my background including the circles that I'm going to create in the background. So in the main section we had the Glass UI. So for that I'm going to create a div and I'm going to call this one as glass. After that we had around 5 circles. So for that I'm going to also create divs and I'm going to give them class as circle1, and then I'm going to duplicate it 2 more times or 3 more times and then change the name of the class accordingly. After that we are going to head over to the CSS, and first of all we're going to style with the universal selector, which is aesthetic. So we're starting off, we're going to set the margin equal to 0 and we are also going to set the padding of everything equal to 0. After that, we're going to set the box sizing to border box and we're going to change the color to white, just like that. After that, we want to make the UI responsive. For that, I'm going to change the main section, which is the HTML, and specifically, we're going to change the font size to 62.5%. This is so that we can use the REM sizing property. After that, let me also open up the output of this web page so that you can see what is happening onto the browser. Now let's create the background. For that, we're going to style the main section. So we are going to start off by setting the minimum height, which is going to be 100 of the view height. After that, we are going to create the background, and for the background we are going to be using a linear gradient. Now in the linear gradient, we are going to simply type in the properties as to top and then right. After that, we are going to provide the colors that we are going to use for this linear gradient. So whenever you type in the gradient, you separate them with a comma, so you can type almost infinite values of gradient and those gradients would be added to the web page. So as soon as I save my HTML, you can see that I get this linear gradient onto the web page. Now we're going to add in some other properties to this main section. The very first property is going to be the display, which we are going to set it equal to flex. After that, we want to align the items to the center, and we also want to justify the content to the center as well. Once that is done, basically we are done with the styling of our main section. Now let's talk about creating our circles onto the background. So for the circles, we are going to change the background to white. Now for the first circle, we are going to change the height to 10 rem, and then we are going to change the width to 10 rem as well. And then we are going to change this property, which is border radius, which is going to convert it to a circle. Just like that. After that, we want to give this circle a gradient as well. So for that, we are going to change the background property, set it equal to linear gradient. We are going to set the direction of the gradient towards top right. After that, we are going to pass in the colors for the gradient. So as you can see that for this circle we are using the RGBA values, and the reason for that is we have the control over the opacity, because when we are working with the glass UI or some similar theme, then opacity plays an important role. So you can see that we have this linear gradient on the circle applied as well. Now let's also style circle number 2, number 3 and number 4 quickly. So you can see that we have created 4 different circles of different height and different width, and we are using the length unit as REM so that they are responsive. After that, you can see that we have used sometimes 2 gradients, sometimes 3 gradients, or sometimes 2 gradients with a solid color, just to add in some little variation. After that, now what we want to do is we want to place these circles at different positions. Now for that, we're going to come inside the circle number 1, and then we are going to change the position to fix. After that, we're going to position them from the top depending upon a specific percentage, like 13%, and from the left, let's say 12%. Similarly, we're going to position all of these circles at different positions. Now you can clearly see that we have positioned the circles at different places. Now reason for using percentages instead of pixel or REM is that whenever we increase the size of the viewport of the browser, the circles actually move along according to the size of the screen, just like that. Anyways, let's talk about creating the glass UI or the glass section onto our web page. So we have already created this div with a class name equal to glass. So let's head to the CSS file and let's add some styling to this particular div. So we are going to start off by setting the height equal to, let's say, 80% of the view height. Once that is done, we're going to change the width towards 65% of the entire screen. And then we're going to add in the linear background like we were doing for the background of the main section and for the circles. We are going to set the direction towards right bottom, and after that we are going to use the RGBA values again because we want to change the value of the opacity as well. So RGBA, and in here we're going to simply type the colors as 255, 255, 255 and the opacity is 0.7. Now for the second color, the values are 107, 228, 214, 0.3. So now if I save my program, you can see that we get this section of the glass UI onto the output. But there are a few problems with this. The first is that the edges are a little too sharp. So we're going to add in border radius, and we're going to set the border radius equal to 2 rem. So now the edges are round. After that, it seems like this glass UI has been placed before or behind the circle. So for that, we're going to use the z index property to place it in front of the circle. Let's set its value equal to something like 7. After that, we want to apply a blur. Now to apply a blur within HTML and CSS, we need to use this property which is the backdrop filter, and then we're going to set it property equal to blur, and then we're going to choose the strength of the blur. So I'm going to change the strength towards 0.4 rem, just like that. So now we have this beautiful blur applied on the circles. So basically the main part of the glass UI is almost done. Now if you look at the image that we had that we wanted to create, now once we have done that, you can clearly see that this glass UI or the glass section needs to have this navigation bar on the left and then this whole section about the information. What we will do instead is that we will make this section like a drop down list. So this whole section would be hidden, and when we were to move our mouse over it, this whole section would open up like a list. After that, we have this section for the social icons. So let's start with this navigation bar on the left. So inside this glass section or the glass div, we are going to first create a navigation bar. So we are going to use the semantic for nav. After that, in this we want to create an unordered list. So we have the tag as UL. In this, we're going to create our first list item, which is going to contain our logo. So for that, I'm going to create a div with a class name set to logo. Now this div is going to contain an image of our logo. So let's create an image tag and let's set the source equal to /images, and in here I have this linuxhint logo.png. So we're going to use that. Alternately, we're going to simply say there is our logo. So we get this logo right over here. Do not worry, we still have to style it, that is why it looks so ugly. After that, within this navigation bar, we're going to add in some other list items. So the first list item that we are going to add is actually going to be an anchor tag. We're going to set the href property equal to the hash symbol because we do not want to redirect the user to anything. Now within this anchor tag, we are going to be using an icon from the Font Awesome website. To use the icon, we simply have to set the class name equal to a specific keyword. So if I were to simply place the icon of the home, then I would use the keyword as FA-home. And as soon as I save this, you can see that I have this home icon right over here, which is clickable as well. After that, we're also going to add in the span element. Now in this span element, I'm just simply going to type it as home. And I'm also going to set the class of the span element as nav item so that we can style them later on. Just like that. And if we were to talk about this icon tag and specifically this class FA-home, then if we head over to the website of the Font Awesome and search for home, then we have all of these icons that we can use. Now to use any of these icons, simply click on them and you would get this class ID for that particular item. So that is how I'm going to create the next few items in my navigation bar. So now you can see that I have created this navigation bar which contains the following options. We have home, code, videos and help. Don't worry, we're going to style them vertically. So let's head back to our CSS file. Now in this file, the very first thing that we're going to do is that we're going to style our navigation bar. So we're going to set the positioning equal to absolute. After that, we're going to set the height at 100%. We're going to change the background color to RGBA. After that, we're going to use the color 078-146 and then the opacity equal to 0.4. So we have this dark shade for the background of the navigation bar. After that, we also want some round edges, so border radius is going to be 2 rem. Once that is done, we can adjust the width and let's set the width value equal to 30%. After that, let's set the overflow property equal to hidden. So as you can clearly see that the logo is now contained within this navigation bar. So that was the doing of this overflow property. Now if we look closely at our picture, then we can clearly see that we have this little glow right beneath our navigation bar. So let's try adding this glow. Now this can be adding by using the box shadow. So we're going to add a box shadow, but we're going to set the color so that it resembles a glow. So first of all, let's set the attributes as 0 rem, 0.5 rem and then 2 rem. After that, for the color, we're going to use RGBA and the color that we're going to use is 107, 228, 214 and let's set the opacity equal to 0.8. After that, we have this nice little glow all across our navigation bar. Now the thing that is looking really ugly is the logo. So let's contain this logo inside a circle. So let's simply access the CSS for this logo. And the very first thing that we're going to do with this logo is set the display type to flex. Once that is done, we're going to justify the content in the center. Also, let's add some margin to the top. Let's add margin equal to 2 rem and let's add the padding to the bottom equal to 3 rem. But as you can clearly see that the logo itself is not a circle. For that, what we're going to do is that we're going to access the logo div and specifically the image inside that logo div. And then we're going to change the width of this image to 6.5 rem. Also, we're going to change the height to 6.5 rem as well. Once that is done, we're going to add some border radius to make it a circle. So let's add the border radius equal to 50%. So we have this nice little circle. After that, the only thing wrong with this navigation bar are the items. They should be vertically aligned. So for that we're going to access the navigation bar and specifically the anchor tags inside that navigation bar. So we're first going to start off with text decoration and we're going to set it equal to none. Once that is done, we're going to change the width of the text equal to 18 rem and then we're going to set the font size equal to 1.4 rem. Lastly, let's change the color of each anchor tag. So color RGBA and we're going to use the color 107, 228, 214 and then opacity equal to 0.5. Once that is done, what we want to do is that we want to separately customize the icons and the text of our navigation bar. First of all, let's style the icons. So we have nav.fas which specifies their class. After that, let's set the position equal to relative. Let's set the width and height equal to 4 rem. Once that is done, let's position them from the top equal to 1.3 rem. Let's also align the text towards the center, so we have text align. Let's do center, and lastly we are going to change the font size equal to 1.4 rem. After that, let's also access the items of our navigation bar. Now this is basically going to access the text of each individual item on the navigation bar. So first of all, let's set the position equal to relative. Once that is done, let's set the positioning from top equal to 1.1 rem. Once that is done, let's also add some left margin equal to 0.4 rem. At this point in the project, I had made an error. And the error was that I forgot to wrap the anchor tags in separate li items. So basically what I did was I wrapped the anchor tags inside the same li. So that is why the styling was not being performed. So simply change the anchor tag and store them inside separate li elements. And the styling would be applied as soon as you save the CSS code. So as soon as I save my CSS file, the icons are totally styled. Also we want to add some kind of animation when we hover over these icons, maybe like increasing the size of the text. For that, let's simply type in nav and then access the anchor tag and the attribute of hover. And within these curly brackets, we're going to set the font size equal to 1.6 rem, which is slightly higher than the original one. So now if I hover over this, the size increases by a little, just like that. After that, if we head on over to the picture, you can clearly see that we have this navigation bar at the bottom, which is known as a footer. So it contains almost the same icon, so basically the styling is almost the same. So let's quickly run over this styling. So outside of this navigation bar, inside our HTML, we're going to create a footer. So footer has a semantic as footer, and within this footer, the process is basically the same. We're going to create an unordered list, and in that list, we're going to create list items, and for each list item, we're going to have an icon which has a specific class according to font awesome. So the very first class is going to be FabFA Facebook, and similarly I'm going to add in the icons for other social media platforms. So after I've added these icons, I need to style them separately. So let's head back to the CSS and style them quickly. We already know the styling, so that is why I'm going to fast forward this part. So we're not getting any display onto the browser, and that is because we have actually messed up the names of the classes for each icon. So it's actually FAB space and then the name of the icon that we want to use. So simply remove the hyphen and type in the name. Now as soon as I save this program, I get the icons at the bottom of my glass UI. Anyways, let's move on with the styling of the glass UI. So currently after the styling, we have this little animation which actually brings up the icon and move the other icons away. So what we want right now is when we hover over a particular icon, then we should get a separate color for each individual icon. Basically, if I want to hover over the YouTube, then I should get a box shadow of red color. Now to access these icons, we're going to use footer, then UL. After that, we're going to use list items. And for every list item, we have this attribute which is known as the nth child. In this nth child, we can pass in the number of the child that we want to access. So if I were to pass in the number as 1, that would mean this Facebook icon. So after that, I'm going to access the hover property with the help of a colon. And for this hover property of this Facebook icon, I'm going to change the background color. So the background color that I'm going to choose for the Facebook one is going to be the hash symbol 004E92. So now if I hover over the Facebook icon, I get this dark bluish shade. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other logos. And once I'm done with the background colors for all of these icons, if I save my CSS and hover over these icons, you can clearly see that I get different color for each icon.
just like that. Once that is done, we are only left with this one single div that we have to create. So let's try that now. So right after the navigation bar, I'm going to create a div with the class name equal to card. And inside this div, I'm going to have two different divs, one for the image and one for the content. Now, for the image, I'm going to call this one as image box. After that, I'm going to also create my other div, which I'm going to name as content. Now inside the image box div, I'm going to place an image, and for this image I'm actually using a royalty-free image from Unsplash. After that, for the content div, I am going to create an h2 tag in which I'm going to simply type in stray hydrated. After that, I'm going to create a horizontal rule on the output. Once that is done, I'm going to create a p tag in which I'm going to paste in my content that I want to display. Now once we have added our content to the HTML, let's style it in the CSS. So the very first thing that we are going to style is going to be the card class. Now within this class, we are going to set the position equal to fixed. We are going to give the distance from the top equal to 0 rem. We are going to be giving the distance from the right equal to 1.5 rem, width equal to 59%. After that, we are going to add in the height equal to 14 rem. Now to make round edges, we are going to add border radius equal to 1 rem. After that, let's add in a box shadow. And then we're also going to add padding of 2 rem and 4 rem. Once that is done, we also want to change the cursor equal to pointer. Let's add the margins equal to auto. Now if you look closely right behind our picture, we have this section for the card. But what we need to do is we need to place this image inside of that card as well. So let's do that right now. But before that, let's add the background gradient to this card as well. So background linear gradient, and then we know how to create the gradient. Now let's add some styling to this image box. So we have the class name as image box. We're going to start off with the margin to the top, set it equal to 2 rem. We're going to set the position equal to relative, width equal to 100%, display is going to be flex. We're going to justify the content to the center. After that, we're going to use the z-index value to place it at the z-index of 1. After that, we want to manually translate this image a little bit up. So for that, we have the property as transform, and in this property we have a method known as translate at y-axis, and we want to translate it at least 80 pixels to the top. So that is why we're putting the value as negative so that it translates up. Anyways, after that, let's style our image. So for that, we have the img tag. We're going to change the width equal to 16 rem. After that, we're going to give it a border radius of 2 rem. Once that is done, let's add some box shadow. After that, we also want to place this content inside this card that we have created. For that, let's style our content. So first of all, we're going to start off with the padding. So let's set the padding equal to 1.4 rem and 0.3 rem. Once that is done, let's add the text alignment to center. Let's also transform this text a little bit upward by, let's say, 10 rem. And right now we're going to set the opacity equal to 0. Now you might be wondering, why are we doing this? Like I've told you before, that we are going to show this entire container when we hover over this card. So for that, we're going to set the initial opacity equal to 0, and when we actually show the drop down list, only then we are going to increase the opacity of the content. Anyways, now since we are working with drop down list, we're going to add in some transition speed. So in the content, we are going to add in transition and set its speed equal to 0.3 seconds. Now when we have done this with the transition speed, we also need to add the transition speed to the card as well. So let's head back to the card and let's add the transition property, and let's set its value equal to 0.3 seconds. So now we have this hover speed, but still we have to add in the attribute for hover. So now let's create the hover effect for the card. So we have dot card and then the hover attribute. Now in here we're going to simply set the height equal to 39 rem. Now once that is done, if we hover over a card, we have this smooth drop down effect. Now in this effect, we also want to display our content. So for that, we are going to add in the dot card and then hover property, and then we're going to add in the greater than symbol, and then we're going to type in dot content. This basically means that when this event occurs, we're going to add or alternate the values of this particular item. So in this, we're going to set the opacity back to 1,
and after that we are going to add in the transform to transform it along the y-axis by -8 rem, just like that. So now when we hover over this card, you can clearly see the content appears. Anyways, we are still left with a few different settings that we have to do within this content, such as the h2 element and the paragraph tag. So for that, simply type in .content and access the h2 element. After that, simply set the font size equal to 2.3 rem. After that, similarly we're going to access the paragraph tag. We are going to set the font size equal to 1.4 rem. And with that, we're basically done with our entire project. So let's first look at the image which we were trying to achieve. So basically we were trying to achieve this thing. Now let's look at what we have developed. So this is what we have made. Now if we hover over the card, we have the same output but with a smooth transition of drop down effect. Not only that, this whole website that we have created is responsive because we were using the length units as rem. Now what do I mean by this? But before going over to the responsive one, let's talk about the other things that we have added. So we have this smooth transition effect on the text for navigation bar, and we have the background colors and this transition on the social icons. Not only that, this whole website is also responsive. Now what do I mean by this? So if I were to simply bring down my browser or the size of my browser, the content is going to adjust itself. Now this is because we have used the length units as rem. Anyways, that brings us to the end of this tutorial. The thing that you need to do is you need to practice. So make up a project of your own, or maybe get the idea from the internet and practice it with creativity. And soon enough, you would start your web development journey. And for that, I wish you good luck.
Congratulations, you have completed the course of HTML and CSS, and now you can start calling yourself a web developer. But not quite right now. Basically what you need to do is that you need to take your steps even further. You need to learn more about web development and you need to practice more and daily. So what you can do right now is you can come up with your own project ideas, or maybe pick up some project ideas from the internet and implement them with the help of HTML and CSS. And after that, make sure to share your achievement with the linuxhint community and we would be happy to guide you even more. Anyways, I wish you good luck for your web development journey.